what's up, Scott Walker here with Imagination Creation Films, and today it is February 11th, 2022, as if you needed to know the date. And, well, we have a surprise for you. Well, that rhymed. Okay. So, yeah, we have a guest today. You've seen him on here several times before, but he's finally released philmColorR3, or R3, and it's pretty good. So we will jump right off and just bring in Phil Holland because he's Phil Holland. Hey, Phil.
Hey there, Scott.
How you doing, buddy?
For the last 20 minutes.
What? No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
That TV magic. I was working on a show once, and I was visiting an actor while he was a guest on a talk show, and before he gets called out to stage, I don't know if you've ever seen how these talk shows work, but they have like wrangling areas, the green room and stuff like that. But there's this thing where they put you in position off stage, and there's a solid like 3 minutes sometimes, or 5 minutes, depending on the intro, where like there's a fairly big actor or actress just standing there, like hidden off camera. It's beautiful stuff because it reminds me of like theater days. And it's just this like awkward thing where it's like you've got all dressed and then you got to come out with a big old smile and you always kind of look miserable, and then it's like you hear your name, you got to jump out and go like hello and whatever.
Yeah, you leave from the green room and you're like, okay, I'm pumped, and now please wait.
Yeah, we kind of did a paper rock scissors from afar just to kind of kill the couple of minutes there.
Right.
Yeah.
Joel says he will not miss Phil this time. You will not.
I saw.
So
Joel's
Phil,
question.
Introduce yourself for the three people in the world who don't know who you are, and a little background. Talk to us. Tell us what's going on.
I think that's a little overstated. Yeah, I'm a director and DP based in Los Angeles. I kind of work everywhere. I have been in the film industry since the late 90s. I've had a very strange career as well. And I think that's, I don't know, part of the uniqueness of my specific journey in this industry. Mainly because when I got kind of like my big break, I was thrust into the world of high-end feature films. At a time, we're going to be talking about color grading today. Back when I started color grading, there was no Davinci Resolve. So we made the tools, and it was a very interesting time. But now, actually, what's really cool about modern era is the tools are extremely accessible. You have a variety of tools you can choose from, depending on what workflows you want. I try not to, I think everyone's got interesting like use case scenarios. I think there's been a lot of people who use some piece of software versus another, but I know people doing reality TV who are completely going through Premiere Pro or Final Cut for their entire workflow. That's their thing. I know feature films that have never stepped foot in Davinci Resolve. They're always using Baselite or something similar. That's their thing. And Resolve obviously has become sort of the most popular sort of color suite in the world, just because its entry price of free is hard to argue with. In fact, their professional version, they could charge probably $5,000 for it and still sell a lot. Probably.
Yeah, they've definitely priced that aggressive.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's no brainer. I'll happily spend $300. No problem.
Well, if my memory serves correctly, before Adobe bought SpeedGrade, and it was Iridas who owned it, I think it was at its cheapest point $35,000 per license. Right. And our studio had a Baselite, and they got me my license, so I didn't have to pay for it. But I mean, our Baselite setup was something like $7 to $8 million at the time, so it was quite a bit of cash. And then the backside of the servers for the studio and stuff, which was like another bazillion dollars. But long and the short of it, Davinci Resolve used to actually cost that much too. But the fact that BMD bought it and then eventually, brought it down in price, I think they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And I think when it was down, I got really curious when it got down to the $1,000 price point, because it used to be like $25,000 prior to that or something like that.
Right.
So, yeah. I was already using it by then, but it was like, okay, what are these people doing? Like, what space are they entering? And then the free version came out, and it was like, okay.
Yeah,
And
and the free version was originally fairly limited in the high end stuff, but
yeah,
that's kind
yeah.
of dissolved away a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's still. I mean, I've been on the studio version so long now that I don't even know what the differences are. But um, I imagine there's some things that are still pretty different in terms
It's
of like
it's
export
it's
mode.
not even noise reduction anymore. I think certain noise reduction is now available in the free version,
Oh wow.
and like the resolution, it used to be you couldn't go over 4K. That's gone now.
Yeah.
It's such a and you know the using multiple graphics cards used to be a thing, and that's not it anymore.
Yeah. That's interesting. Wow. Well,
And
I
like
mean, now that you get it with various products or something like that, in the I think the pro version or studio version is now what, $300 if you just buy it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
the best deal on the planet was that speed editor.
Yeah.
For the longest time, if you bought the speed editor, you got the license with it. So it was $300, and you got the speed editor, which was fantastic.
It's a value add for them, and
Yeah,
I appreciate the one thing I'll say about the Resolve team, they are one of the most active in terms of implementing new features, codecs, SDKs. I think the folks over at Colorfront do a pretty good job, for people who know what transcoder is and stuff like that. But there's just not a lot of companies that really put the focus in towards the motion picture professional, to integrate features quickly. And often, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and said, "Hey, this isn't working," and begrudgingly they were like, "Oh, we have to look at it," but short of maybe one release, all of that stuff gets fixed, and Resolve's been good at that. And there's been other mountains to climb. I understand how things work at really big companies. They're trying to support software on computers that are 10 years old as well, so some of the changes are not as easy to implement.
well, they get into that bloated methodology, and everybody wants all their people sending reports and all that stuff. Res-
Yeah,
Black Magic has really been on the ball. I would say since 17, they have just gone like threefold into it. Because I mean, when Apple Silicon came out, they were as far along as Final Cut Pro X
yeah,
was at implementing Apple Silicon. No one else was. Adobe was like, oh, wait, there's Apple Silicon. It's like they didn't even know. They knew, but I mean, they were so
yeah.
slow.
That's true, but it eventually comes, and usually when stuff's executed well from the companies, like everyone's really happy, and then the slow hum of people being angry at whatever software package starts to develop. Once people get grumpy again.
Right,
And
right. Let's dive in. I know people are like really
yeah,
interested in
yeah. Let
everything
me
on you.
let me let me give a light primer. So,
Yeah, go for it.
long ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I was doing color on feature films. And the film workflow was all Cineon based, Cineon log curve, because that's how our film scanners worked. That's actually still pretty much how that works in a lot of houses these days. So, interestingly enough, when I decided to invest in red cameras and choose them for my workflow, they used what they called red log film, which was literally the identical Cineon curve. So things were like brilliant for me to just straight come from a film workflow into the red world. All of the thousands of LUTs I made on all those projects actually just directly worked very well. Now, at some point, we got cameras with a lot more dynamic range, and Red eventually implemented a wide color space as well as a bigger log curve. And that's where we get into the era of IPP2. This all happened last decade. So you have REDWideGamut RGB, and that's that color space that can just hold a ton of color. And red, or I guess they just call it log 3G10. So this log curve is really interesting, because it's extremely, it can hold a lot of dynamic range. In fact, the reason, even outside of me developing the LUTs for the Red IPP2 workflow, I actually still, for a lot of camera workflows, bring them into this space because the gamut is so broadly supported, and the log curve can hold pretty much anything, anything that's shot on Earth. So,
Right.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And actually, some post house do that workflow. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. I think now that Davinci in particular has their own wide gamut, you know, some people are going that route, but the problem is that's not supported in, you know, third-party software so well. So I don't know. It's a tricky one, and you can use aces. I mean, it's another way to slice cake. I've chosen to go with the IPP2 ecosystem primarily because there's the advantage of implementing everything in camera as well. And that's been part of the journey. So IPP2 comes out. I was able to test it for a bit, and I think I developed like probably 3 or 4 Creative Cube LUTs, and I shared them with Graham Natras, their lead color scientist, and he liked it. We had some back and forths, and I got a crazy idea about doing this big color project. And it wasn't called FilmColor at the time, but I showed Jared what I was up to, and he's like, "You got to go with FilmColor." So I was like, "All right, man."
Was it Fillet before LUTs?
I just don't want people to think it's like an ego thing, but the whole film thing in my life with the PHILM, back when I was in the scanning record department at Rhythm and Hughes Studios, the fill from filming was like a thing for me in my life. And the first program I ever made at that studio was called PHILM, which was actually something tied to the laser recorder at the studio. And it just stuck with me for years. And I mean, I could not outlive it. So, and it still has stuck with me, and it's now living in the world of the color stuff I do.
I mean, if you got a name that works in your industry, you should definitely try to. What's the term when you make a colloquy? Soliloquy? What is that? What is film with PHILM? What is that called?
I don't know. I don't know what word to reach.
It's like a pun. Someone in the chat will know it, but it's colloquy or I don't know, whatever it is. But I mean, you have the name Phil. I mean, it works really well. Why shouldn't you use it?
And I mean, I've done color work for Kodak. I've done color work for Arri. You know, like it was kind of a natural, like, you know, who else is gonna, you know, take up that sort of nomenclature, I guess. But I don't know. It's cool. I'm happy with it. It's easy to digest. You know, I'm not calling it like RGB Zapluts or whatever.
Both
so
LUTs.
long and the short of it is, so FilmColor Release 1 came out, and I made a bunch of LUTs. And I kind of took that feedback early on, and I took it to heart. You know, I saw who was using the LUTs. You know, I suddenly had filmmakers and productions all over the world kind of looking at this. And I realized the audience was quite different. It wasn't exactly, you know, people just looking to slap stuff on footage. It was, you know, people who are doing work for productions and stuff. So for Release 2, I expanded it out and made all of these achromic looks, which are black and white, concerted like grades and things like that, you know, aren't too strong, but add some zing to something. I don't like a lot of extremely strong LUTs that you just kind of get locked into this like really finite space. And some of the core design logic for FilmColor has been to make sure that the LUTs work with all exposure methods in honestly lighting conditions. That's why you guys see me do so much testing. That's why I made that post recently. That was a big part of Release 3 was doing even more R&D to kind of test all of the cameras, make sure that everything isn't breaking. You know, I have a whole quality control thing that I go through, and it's a pain. And in fact, when Red released the Komodo, I was really honored to be in this position. They pinged me to see if I'd be interested in making LUTs for the camera. And not like a crazy amount of them. I was like, I'm not giving you guys FilmColor. Like, that's like a lot of LUTs and whatever. He's like, no. You know, let's see if we can do a couple and, you know, see if people like them kind of thing. And just the process of making the LUTs that exist in that camera was like a 6-month process. Just because not only did Red have to test them out, they sent them off to post studios as well, everything I'm doing for FilmColor. And I'm really honored to have that because, you know, when I turn on my Komodo or my Raptor, like my stuff's already in there and it's like, oh, cool. But, you know, now we're in a different era of release 3. I really wanted to expand on some concepts. You know, I'm a cinematographer, so I need to make LUTs that are appealing towards that angle. And I think without getting in even to the crazier color stuff that I'm doing, the curves, just the minute ability to have the curves built into the camera is so powerful, because now I can develop these flat looks with still a curve to them, like a slight S curve to them, but it'll give you more of that, like, you know, film negative look, but without the film print curve. Or you can go stronger with more contrast to get something more like a bleach bypass sort of contrast level. And just having those are the ones that are in my V-Raptor right now. Like, I have all of my curves loaded, just a couple of my schema LUTs, which I'll talk about, and a couple of my polychromes, which my polychromes, I kind of refer to them as like negative stocks, and I'll probably explain my mindset and show some examples of that. But yeah, man, it's been a crazy wild ride, and I mean, I've seen thousands of productions now using them. I've seen stuff straight to air, just the LUT slapped on, which is cool. I love seeing, like, on my Instagram when people tag me, like, you know, they have the FilmColor loaded up on their monitor, and I don't know, it's been kind of cool thing to see used all over. So
When did R3 begin?
I mean, technically before R2 was done, but I took a little break after R2 was done to kind of like gather my thoughts and start generating some new ideas. I was also tinkering with some code. Just, you know, it's one of those experimental things, but really I wanted to listen for that first year. You know, I was still making LUTs. People were hiring me to generate looks for their productions. They were sending me footage from a small shoot or whatever, to just help create looks. And I don't really market myself as a colorist anymore, but for my own productions, I am often the colorist, you know, for pretty big jobs. And it's more of a kind of like I'm a more or less a small production company, even though I'm working on sometimes very big projects. And sometimes I'm just making technical LUTs too, which is even weirder. But so all of those things that happened in that first year, like Ivan reached out, he needed a LUT for something, and I kind of generated a couple looks for him just to show him where I was thinking things were going. And I think he ended up using it. He posted that, you know, this is 3 years ago now. I shouldn't even remember any of that stuff, but I remember all those things. I make little notes, and I see people using the LUTs, and then people shoot me a message every now and again. Wouldn't it be nice if this? And obviously, FilmColor 2 has some looks that are so commercially viable that they've become so popular. So I wanted to look at those a lot closer for FilmColor 3. So, and I've done that. I've really taken to task on that one. Yeah.
Andrew Red says we can now start the stream because he's here.
Oh, hello there, Andrew. Yes.
Boggs. Hello, Boggs.
Yeah. Good to see everybody. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a great journey. And obviously, this is a massive release. I mean, I just dropped 540 LUTs on people. They're categorized. I don't think it's that complicated. I think, especially if you start thinking from a look to tone to filmmaking perspective, it's pretty simple. And I think what's really powerful about the IPP2 workflow is the twofold thing. You have this color workflow that is scene referred going out to a display delivery, right? So FilmColor works for SDR and HDR delivery all the same. And the other thing is, with the creative cubes, you can dial them back. So if I was just baking these all into Rec 709s or even HDR output, you can't dial back the look. It's just there. Like if you dial back the look, you're going to be screwing with like the actual transform, which is not ideal. So save stream. Yes.
Yeah, Anthony, just so you're aware, all of my streams I leave out. They stay up forever. I don't do the live stream and then it vanishes. Also, this is a more of a visual stream, so probably less important. But this will actually be on Spotify here in a day or so too. I usually export these out and pop them up to Spotify, as well as I think they're on Apple iTunes or Apple Music now. I think, but yeah.
You know what? I think one of the interesting things, as more people found out I was working on release 3, more people kind of got curious about it, and it was studios and camera companies, and then even some of my back and forth with Blackmagic, because I reached out to them to get permission to modernize their Resolve film looks, and it was a very interesting conversation because those were made so long ago that they couldn't even really find any information about who or how they created them. I deconstructed them like a few colorists have. I figured out what was going on, but the whole inspiration to that was I was in my hotel room in some country, and on my YouTube recommended somebody's stream popped up and they were showing how to use those LUTs, and I was like, that's not how you use those LUTs. It's bad. And it's fine, you know. The famous saying in the color world is if it looks good, it looks good. But you know, those were designed for a Cineon curve very specifically, and I just wanted to make something that these things are so popular and in use for very quick turnaround productions and even on feature films. I just wanted to make something that was IPP2 compatible and supporting the wider gamut. So, yeah. I'm very happy that they agreed to that because that's actually an honor as well. I mean, those are popular looks.
Do you want to jump in and start showing some film color and
yeah.
And everybody in the audience, feel free to post your questions. We're not going to get to them immediately because I want to get Phil going into his thing so everything kind of can fall in. The questions can kind of hit in the various areas. So please post your questions. I won't forget them, and we'll get them to Phil here shortly.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share my screen here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And I'm going to say, don't share these tips. All right, let's go to just Resolve. How's that looking, Scott?
Let's add to stream. Boom. There you go.
All right. So I am in Davinci Resolve here, and I just grabbed a bunch of R3D snapshots, which are still frames of footage coming off of an external USB drive in this case, just to keep it kind of moving. I brought in some airy sample footage too, just to show you some of the concepts I'm doing with the transforms here. But, you know, the basics of IPP2, I'll just show you how this particular timeline is set up. And actually, I'll just give everybody in the world a quick color tip. When you're setting up Resolve to do any color grading from here on out, under color management, always have 3D lookup table interpolation set to tetrahedral. This is very, very important because some LUTs, even manufacturers just Rec 709 LUTs, they will generate more noise, potentially banding, and even image artifacts if it's just set to the simple trilinear. Tetrahedral solves all of those problems and those headaches. I mean, you guys are spending thousands of dollars on camera on this little bit right here. A lot of people don't even know about. What else can I show you with this? So master settings, I'm just in a 4K thing. I am in my camera raw. I have my IPP2 set up for our color science. You can do legacy or whatever, but we're on IPP2. It's the newest stuff, newest demosaic, all that stuff. Color space, REDWideGamut, log 3G10. I'm leaving chroma noise reduction on. Don't really need to. And then use camera metadata. I've selected all of those because I don't just want to have one default ISO, especially with a timeline like this, because everything was shot years across different cameras and, you know, you name it. The rest of the color management here, I am not doing Davinci color management. In fact, I rarely do that, but that's just my personal choice. Just setting the timeline color space to REDWideGamut Rgb log 3G10. And we'll just go from that. So that's why you see everything in log on the timeline, right? So the very basics of IPP2, and I'm just going to do this real quick. This one node I have actually in my timeline settings. I'm just going to go into FILMColorR3, R3 here, and you'll see I have a bunch of different categories, right? So I have Col, Lab, Dev, Sat, Curves, Fades, Tones, Achromic, Polychromic, Print Split Tones, Revised Base Stocks, Schema, a lot going on. But then I have these categories called Out, and these are our output transforms. And you'll notice that these things kind of go in the order that I've laid them out here. So this is going to be the end of our chain. And let me just grab Red's defaults, medium soft, which I kind of recommend everyone to use.
Let me pause real quick. Everybody in the chat, is the resolution on the screen, is it okay? Can you see what he's doing? If we need more, I mean, I can't go any further than StreamYard will let me, but I can maximize his screen if that will help. You guys just let me know in the chat. Go ahead, Phil, and I'll just make the changes as we go.
Yeah, so right now all I've done is I've added Red's output transform, and I'm just going to change my node label to out, just so it's very clear. So now we've transformed this footage, and in this case we're going to a Rec 709 BT 1886, pretty standard stuff. We can scrub through. Everything looks good. Happy days. Now I'm going to, let's see, add a node before this. And I'm just going to grab, just to show you guys what I'm talking about here, any one of my schema looks and apply it. And that's it. You're basically color grading before the output transform. And this is actually not a new concept, but it is a new concept because a lot of people have been color grading after the output transform, this direction. So, and you can still do that. Every workflow is viable, in my opinion. I don't think we need to, argue that point. But the cool thing is about this, and even though we're on an SDR stream, with these output transforms, all you have to do to go to HDR is on your out, grab one of these, and this will now become an HDR grade. And your color grade that exists here with this creative cube should look approximately the same. Now, HDR has its own unique properties, and there might be some tuning you want to do. That's up to you. I'm not going to police whatever stylized look you're going for. Now, I will show you one thing. This look is pretty bold. It's got a nice strong look to it on this clip. I'm just going to show it on something like skin or something like that. So you can see this pretty clearly what it's doing, right? Let's say we like this, but we don't like how strong it is. So in Davinci Resolve, we can just go to the key output here and decrease the gain, maybe to 50-ish%. And now that look is not as strong. You see what I'm saying? So now it's extremely flexible. You can toggle these things on and off. You can tinker with them. It's pretty cool. And that single bit of flexibility is pretty awesome. But I guess while I'm here, maybe I should probably, showcase a little bit like how it's, it might be nice to work. Add a couple nodes here.
Yeah, they definitely like it in the full screen, so I'll just leave it in that for now.
Okay.
Plus, it'll allow us to pick our noses if we need to,
Pretty sure I just got Resolve to crash too, so that's very exciting. Yeah, I did. Wow.
Well,
I cannot click. No, I can click that. Can I click any node?
Let's go back to...
Yeah, let's go full screen real quick. I have not had Resolve crash in this way ever, strangely.
Well, I mean, it happens, but I'll tell you, it's really rare.
Well, I am working off of a notebook that I do actually color grade on occasionally. Not that you really need that text. Yeah. That was a really frustrating crash, but I'll be back up and running in 2 seconds here.
Sure.
It was like the node didn't properly load, which interesting.
I've had a few catastrophic crashes with Resolve, and it's always when I'm doing something really stupid like forgetting to save. But For the most part, my God, is it like 100 times more stable than Premiere?
Okay, yeah, we're back up and running.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead, reshare.
Reshare. Oh, I have to do it on
Reshare
my
that
side.
screen.
Oh my gosh, so hard, this technology.
Because I think you were sharing just the application, and so when it crashed, it okay. Taking that back, and then we will.
Like where we are. So this is our output transform. We're just going to Rec 709. But because I've put this stuff in a very unique order, this is kind of the order of operations I like to work as well. So let's just add one of my bleach bypass looks here. Now, this is my lab development and saturation grouping. And there's lots of really cool stuff in here. In fact, I'm going to reset this node and show you one that nature cinematographers and filmmakers have been asking for. I have these boosts, and these actually pertain to adjusting saturation levels mainly in highlights. So you can see I've just done something to her face when I toggle that on and off. Now the shadows are not saturating at all, but her skin is definitely gaining something. And there's a few of these. Some of them go a little bit over the top. Like this particular one I wouldn't use on a human, but if you were shooting on a hazy day, in fact, let me show you a shot that's maybe more indicative of that, like has a indicative of like a blue sky. Maybe this one. I wouldn't think this shot is that bad, but boom, look at that color. Holy moly, there's a lot in there. And it's very funny because I've talked to people and people are like, oh, there's no saturation in the highlights or something like that. It's like, no, it's just because it's there. If you've exposed for it, it's there. It's living in your shot. You just have to, screech it out. Also in here are some really interesting cool ones like my multi-chromes. This is actually a really cool color saturation and density combination. It really adds some thickness to the color that I find is a little bit more pleasing. Density, I have a couple of different film density ones. This is an additive one, but these are both subtractive based. This is a traditional subtractive. This is mine. It's a very naturalistic density level. It's almost impacting the camera's color response to color as long as it's exposed well. Those deeper reds that are so characteristic of film, that's the whole point of this. And the reason I put this in a separate category is you can literally just use this tool and then do a completely different color grade. You don't even have to use the rest of my LUTs. Like this gets you someplace quick, and now you can build off of it. And that's the whole point. I've got some fun ones like negative, the tone only negative, so you still get the color from the other one. That's a little coding trick, which I find is fun.
That was one of the first negatives I had clicked on. I was like, whoa, what just happened?
Well, people use them for lightning effects or things like that. And, you can also develop looks based off of that. Because here, I'll show you something that I probably shouldn't show you on the stream. But let's go negative.
Come on. It's just us.
If you double stack the negatives, look at that.
Oh.
So now everything you're doing as a colorist is happening in the inverted image. So I'm pushing sort of warm, but what you're going to see is blue because what's actually happening is that. So you can, like I said, this is like a little bit of a colorist toolkit here. This isn't just a LUT release. Scrub's really fun too. It's a really weird saturation model. I discovered this while I was coding one night, and I really like some of the looks that I was generating with it. But do you see how the sky has some desaturated looks to it?
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of some older film. Like if you've ever shot with expired film, you get some really wacky colors sometimes. And that's exactly what this is supposed to do. It's supposed to just give you a little bit of that, it's almost like someone scrubbed the saturation out of the highlights. Subtractive Boost. That's a very different density. It's very slightly different than this one, but this one is actually boosting the saturation, but also keeping the luminance values down during the boost. So what happens, I'll just show you guys really quick. If you look at the waveform right here, you can see this, right, Scott? Here, I'll make it bigger.
Yep, no, you can see it.
Ooh, maybe I shouldn't make it bigger.
Now it's bigger.
So if you just increase your saturation, watch this red over here. You see how the red's raising in luminance?
Right.
Now, there's a lot of different ways to do a subtractive saturation boost. But this one, you see how it didn't go up? Like if I toggle that, you see how it's going down?
Right.
That's really cool because of two things. I've done some really interesting research on perceptual saturation, what's pleasing, what's not. But also when it comes to just color grading, sometimes when you're increasing that saturation, you can come into gamut issues. So I'll just reset this node and like I'll increase the saturation. This is what a lot of people end up doing. They're like, ooh, I like this red. And then they'll go into the hue versus luminance and go, okay, now I got to bring that luminance down for red. But what you're doing now is you're mixing some bad things. And if you take this too far, you can, I don't think this shot will have it, but you'll get some artifacts no matter what, like if you just take things down to a certain point. So my purpose was to actually have an impact on the color density that would give you something a little bit more like a film-like feel without going full bore into that zone. There we go. Now things are good. And also I just showed you can use these nodes in combination with grading or these LUTs with grading. So I'll just leave a saturation one like this on. And I love this bubble shot. I shot this when I was in South Korea, and I just always have loved this shot. I'll move into my curves, and my curves are all really sensibly thought out. Decon means decon. Flat is not quite flat. There's still an S curve going on here, very subtle. These are both like implying that you've shot something without a print curve essentially on it, and it still results in a pleasing image. You can still do stuff. And I've seen so many people making these like flat profiles for what they think is like a Super 16 look or the Super 8 look. This can get you there. Low con is just a little bit below the medium soft stock red output. So you can see it's just a little bit lower. Now, medium con is very important because it does share the knee as well as the general curve shape of my Kodak 2383 curves. So this is about the film-like contrast level. So it's just an important one to keep in mind. And we have strong and very strong, which are really mostly useful if you have really flat subjects, flatly lit subjects, or you're trying to go for something like maybe an actual bleach bypass look. Look at how quick that was. I'll make that full screen. That looks good.
Whoops, that disappeared.
Oh, it doesn't show in full screen?
No, because I think I think you're showing window.
Oh, here. You know what? I have nothing sensitive on this computer. I'm going to stop sharing real quick.
And if anybody's looking for Phil's film color, there is a linky right here.
I have nothing sensitive.
Click on that, and then he's got a coupon code of, was it Huckleberry? Huckleberry, and you get $25 off.
Yeah, I got nothing sensitive going on, so you guys can see my full screen. I just want you guys to see that color grade.
I'll bring it back into the stream here, and there we go.
You can see that now?
Yeah, we can see that. Let me get rid of the banner. There we go.
How freaking cool is that? So the way I designed my bleach bypass this round is it's something that you can separate from the curve itself. And again, if you don't like the strength of this is the bleach bypass look. I'm just going to call this BB, and I'm going to call this curve. You can dial down the gain. Look at that. Now you're bringing some of that saturation back. So essentially you have a partial bleach bypass, which actually has some merit in how bleach bypass was done. In fact, here is another bleach bypass that I've made with a partial skip version. So I made 3 actually for FilmColor's 3 is release. So, but yeah, this is actually one of my favorite LUTs. I've spent so much time doing bleach bypass stuff. It's actually, I think the first bleach bypass LUT I had to make was in the 2000s for, it was for a film that Jim Cameron was going to do. And then he ended up doing Avatar after that. And then I made one for Riddick. I made one for The Ring. I made a pseudo one for X-Men 2. This strangely, I've been doing bleach bypass stuff for a very long time. So it's just a thing I'm very fond of. If you want that sort of desaturated, kind of moody, almost.
I have a soft spot in my heart for bleach bypass myself.
Yeah. And here's an example where, this contrast curve is giving me a little bit too much. So maybe I'll go to a low, and now I can reveal all those details. And the cool thing is, I'm obviously shooting with red cameras, which have a lot of dynamic range. this is really fun stuff because you can develop these like low contrast looks, and there's so much detail and information down there. If you expose well, it's just going to generate a nice, pleasing look. The other category of LUTs, let me go to something stronger real quick. So you see on my waveform here, let me change this to Vectorscope. As I put that curve on here, let's find something with a little bit more spiky color. So you see how my Vectorscope is growing right now? When I'm applying the curve, it's changing the saturation levels.
Right.
This is what I refer to as natural contrast saturation. This is how every software works with their contrast saturation. But common in film color grading is you sometimes want to use a luminance curve. So I'll apply the same strength curve. These things are identical. But you'll notice this one doesn't change the saturation. Not really. And the reason that's cool is maybe you've dialed your saturation to a place that you want, but you really just want to adjust the tone slightly. And this is a great way to work and have that sort of stylized look. So, you know, I really like the natural color from the shot. I'm not trying to boost the saturation to this, but this doesn't look half bad. And maybe I'll combine it with one of my saturation models like multichrome. I'll take that node label off and just call it sat. Boom. Now I got some density in there, or maybe one of the ones that brings the saturation and the highlights back. You know, you can mix and match these things, and that's the whole purpose of that. So let me show you after the curve what you can do, and I'll just shut the saturation off. And even for now, just the curve. Let's bring up Bubble Guy again. So I have some fades. These are all stylized. You know, I'll just show you the strongest ones. If you see that, we have this lifted shadow appeal.
Yeah.
I've made two types. So if you use this type, you're actually maintaining the knee midtones and everything that you would expect. But if you use low con, you just get a very lifted look that you would expect. But interestingly enough, I've designed these in such a way that you can use these in tandem with my curves. So I'll just put fade here. That's exactly what's going on. And you can tweak this to your heart's content. And honestly, this is why it took a little bit of time to develop all of this stuff, because I wanted to have this sort of, you know, when you develop looks as a colorist, you're building out nodes. You might be doing things individually. This is literally the same idea, except now I'm using it in a LUT workflow that you can literally bring into any application and get the same results. Because sometimes, you know, look at the color warper. Color warper doesn't exist in Baselight, not like this. And I can do stuff with this color warper, and I can generate a look and export it as a LUT, and that works. But that's kind of the thing that I'm, you know, why I'm choosing LUTs for this particular workflow, I guess, is just that cross compatibility. So that's the fades. I'll scratch that. You know, this is a pretty bold look. Not everyone's going to go for that all the time.
Right.
So let's just reset it. And these are exciting. My next category is tones, and I've made a bunch of them. I've made like a really fun amount. In FilmColor Release 2, I noticed a lot of people were using the tone models I made. So I made a bunch of new ones that were really time-consuming to make, but they're all great. They serve different functions and different looks. Here's that shot from Red's website. Now this one's going to lift this, you know, bring the saturation up. They all have unique names, and you'll notice that I have BLCK, Cine, Film, Lift. These all cite specific black points, and what I mean by that is, let's find something that has some darkness in it. Go back to our Vectorscope, or our waveform rather. So right now I have the black variant here, and at the very bottom of my waveform, you can see something's happening to the shadows, and you can actually see it in the image. You know, these go through certain strengths. I actually, for years, have had references for black points, so I'm now bringing that into FilmColor. So Cine is actually the native black point of Red's IPv2 output transform, which isn't quite black, but very close to it. And you'll notice the same thing for Aries output transforms. They do the same stuff. Film gives you that projected film look. So, you know, if you've ever had a projected film image on a wall, you don't get a pure black. So this gives you that sort of lifted shadow look.
Right.
And then lift is a very stylized thing where I don't even know what shot do we show with that. Do I have an alleyway or something with some like occlusion, some shadows? Where did I put that shot? Oh, I know I brought one in. There we go. You can see that you're getting that lifted shadow versus that deeper shadow, if that makes any sense. So that's just Caprion. I'll show you a couple of these. Depth is a really good one. I'll toggle between them. I love this one because it really holds onto your midtones, and it's really about just adding the contrast kind of below the knee. We got the Depth Abyssal. Fortia, it's actually based off of a curve that I got off of a Kodak still film, and I was like, you know what, this looks pretty pleasing. So this characteristic curve can carry over. Harmon's actually based off of something I read off of Ilford. Illidan low-key for a low-key lighting scenario. So this one actually brings everything down. But you see I'm not really screwing with my footage too much. The look still holds.
Right.
Molus is extremely flat. This one's probably going to be the one that everyone uses, is my new print model. Now, the new print model for IPP2, the other curves are not exactly clamping, but you see this highlight right here? I'll zoom in. Now we're getting that sort of like film-like bloom. And I've actually made output transforms that do this as well, but if you want to live in the IPP2 world, this will do that. And that's what's really powerful about this curve. So I made 4 variants with all the different black levels: black, cine, film, and lift. Sorry, that's going off the screen. I also made some stuff that's really cool for people who use exposing to the right, exposure logic, ETTR. So you can pull 1 stop or 2 stops. And again, you can adjust the opacity here, and look at that, and you're bringing it back. Now, why did I include these as LUTs? If you are using a red camera and you can literally dial the, exposure up or down. Well, some people work with ProRes, or some people work with other cameras, and maybe you want to have that freedom of control. So who am I to not include it? Maybe you just want to use this workflow and not go, okay, well, my shot was here. How do I bring it down? It's up to you. You also have, I'll reset it, pushing 1 stop, 2 stops, which is kind of nuts. Shadow Crusher. This is actually just dedicated for IPP2. Just black brings the black levels to 0. And then 2 stops Tugger. This is very interesting. I know quite a few cinematographers who are exposing about 2 stops up, or they're bringing their shots about 2 stops down anyways. That's not the right shot to show for that. I don't know if I don't expose this way very often, but maybe it'll work on this shot. So you see how this brings it down 2 stops? This particular method has been used quite a bit to generate these kind of dark and moody looks. And I think one of the reasons people like this look is what happens to the color that's happening on the face in areas like that. You're almost adding density through the tonality as well. And it's cool. I'm not saying it's a wrong way to work. I would probably dial it maybe to here for this particular shot, but I tend to expose actually extremely accurately. So this thing is not the favorite one for me, but enough people sent me frames where this was such a reoccurring trend. I was like, you know what? I got to make something to support that look. So those are the tones. I'll go through the new achromics. These are kind of fun. For those of you who don't know, my concept with achromics, the word achromic means colorless. And I like that definition because you're removing the RGB color. And in our case, we're actually using that RGB color to turn the image into something more unique. So just cycling through these, you can see the extreme different looks that you're getting. And the ortho looks were something that was much asked for, I think primarily due to the Lighthouse's release. So I definitely spent some time developing some really nice black and white looks for this release. And there's actually a whole bunch with FilmColorR3, which you also get. So I love these. Some of these are really fun. I love shooting in black and white too. So
Yeah, I found those very nice. I was enjoying going through those.
Yeah, I think they're, I'm not going to say they're underrated, but they are useful when you want to go that creative, if that makes any sense. Let's just load up this one. So, well, what's an even better one? I actually showed this off the other day. So this is an interesting shot that has a really mixed lighting condition, which isn't wonderful. And my concept with polychromic stocks, everyone was asking me, man, can you make a film matrix? And I'm like, I can make a film matrix, but what film do you want? You know? So I did make a bunch of film matrices, but I've also made things that are slightly more complicated than that. So like this one does quite a bit to the skin tones. And if you look at our Vectorscope, you know, we're basically pinching. This is not just a two-tone sort of split here. Some of these do a lot of stuff. And I can just cycle through these. And actually, since we're in Davinci Resolve, let me show you a cool trick. You can literally mouse over while you're in the thumbnail mode, and it just previews all the LUTs. And polychromes are very subtle, but you can see her skin tone is changing as well as the color density. And again, I'm just showing you these on all the different shots. These are actually some of my favorite things because essentially what I've done, like if you've shot on like Kodak Ektachrome, it has its own colorimetry. It has its own look. And there's particularly weird quirkiness where like shadows go blue and stuff. I'm not going to imbue things like shadows going blue, not for polychromes or polychromics. But what I will do is I will change how color works, what the density is, how things are working that way. Because again, I may light a shot very specifically. Like this looks good. I'm happy. But I want it to have the appeal of a stock like Keratone, which is a little bit more of an orange one. Because I want the skins to lean that way. And I've built all of these complementary schemes and sometimes triadic schemes from that. So yeah, these are actually some of my favorite things. And basically, this is like having 70 different film cameras at your disposal. 70 film stocks in my mindset. I love them. Some of them are close to each other. Some of them are actually matrices that you guys have seen before, like my crane with a C. This is the base matrix for that collection of LUTs. And I've made this years ago. And I've just decided to finally release it because, hey, why not? People like this look. Now I've translated it this way. There you go. I love what this one does to skin too. It's sometimes very subtle too, depending on the hues that things are landing on. But just depends. You guys have probably seen something pretty close to that on that final grade for that shoot. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you something kind of fun here. This shot's probably good to show this. So I'm going to call this split tone. Now, in our print split tones, we have a bunch of different ones. And these are actually all based off of very common print tones. These are Fujinon or Fujifilm. You can see just a very subtle split tone right there. Do you see it in the shadows and the highlights? Is that showing up, Scott?
Yeah, it is. You can see it definitely in the scopes.
So I got Kodak Premiere. I got Vision. And I've made cool and warm variants. This is actually very much like the Resolve film looks or the ones that are included with Flame and things like that. So I've looked at everyone else's data, but I've also looked at the ones I ended up making for Kodak back in the 2000s. And we also created split tones. But the split tones were actually there mostly to do things like correct the reddish shadow data. So like having a cooler shadow would actually result in a black on screen shadow. So this is definitely leaning towards a stylized look nowadays, and people tend to like it. So I'm going to add a serial before this. I'm going to call this Poly. Now check this out. I'm going to combine the polychrome with the print split tone. And now I have our quote-unquote negative stock going through our print split tone to our output. And just this concept of combining these looks is really powerful. Like, I love this idea because maybe you don't like the split tone from a Kodak stock, but you want to lean more towards the Fuji look, right? Or maybe you want something I may have developed or helped developed on a certain thing. what's a different one I can show that's not so on the nose? NFB. I don't want to call out too many of these, but I will show you one of the special powers this has. Here's a shot. Let's look at our raw settings on this shot. It's actually really low ISO. I don't know why I shot it that way, but probably because I just didn't have enough ND or
Right.
it worked. I got up every morning when I was in Japan and went on these morning walks just to shoot some of the street stuff while I was in Tokyo. So we have about a 5,000 Kelvin with a little bit of a tint adjustment here. And our polychrome is actually doing some stuff. You can see the reds and the yellows getting that impact. And you'll find a lot of my polychromes definitely lean towards some of the Kodak yellows and things. So let's combine the split tone in there. Now this one is a cool shadow, but one of the things, because of the color corrective nature of some of the split tones in the past, you would do stuff that would impact how the shade would be rendered. So this is a daylight shot, but we have cool shadows, right? Now look what's happening. We're almost color correcting that out. And that's what these are doing. So this is almost like a cross-process effect, but in this case, it's working just fine. On this shot, it might just make it all warm. So there's room to get creative here, and people were looking for more tungsten-based looks and things like that. This is definitely one way to get there. There's other ways to get there with this release as well. And also, I don't need to remind you, using the curve in front of this, boom. You see what I'm getting at now?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. Let me find a different curve for this one. Let's get the actual print curve in there. Okay. Let's get the film one. Look at that. Straight away, a nice, powerful look. Pretty convincing. I'm not adding grain or noise or anything like that or whatever, but you get the idea. So that's that kind of workflow that I'm kind of presenting there. Now, if you don't want to go through all that stuff, I have the revised base stocks, which are based off of looks from FILMColorR3. And these were some of the most popular looks. I know Curtis is here, and he definitely loves Heron. Heron's just got such a nice, pleasing sort of skin like point where it just pushes everything. But it's actually Heron, as well as a bunch of other ones, Shrike, they're all actually based off of the same matrix, but with some slight tuning, almost like you were processing your film stock differently. So like Crane is absurdly popular. Like I've seen this thing show up on many, many shoots. And it's just a really well thought out LUT. And the reason I revised them for R3, when I first created quite a few of these, they had built-in tone mapping because they came from scan data, and I was like, okay, well, if you want to have a slightly more linear spine to the middle of your curve, let's build those in. But because we're dealing with that separately now, and honestly more from a colorist mindset, because I don't want to mess with how our exposure is. Like, look at this shot. Like, we've lit this shot this way. Am I changing the lighting of this shot? No, I'm not. I'm not changing any of our contrast that we've set in camera. So I just want the LUTs to work that way. So the revised base stocks have a full grade. They will have some sort of print split tone and some more advanced color stuff. But then we get to this category of schema, which is the bulk of the looks for FILMColorR3. I made 204 of these, which is madness, but you know, this is the value add proposition. Now you get some stylized looks where if you want something to look a little bit more vintagey and have just bold, crazy color, you can get there. If you want, oh gosh, I should show my orange teal. I have yet to actually release orange teal LUTs prior to this release because I was not going to push that look, but Orentele, boom. A very quick stylized orange teal look. And I'm actually really fond of this. And you'll notice there's two things here. There's Orentele and Orentele Sub. So what I've done for some of these is introduce a slight subtractive color scheme. You see how that jacket's getting a little bit more dense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these are really fun. And I mean, I've made a lot of these looks. Morpheus, obviously you can tell what that's inspired by. Some overtly orange and yellow looks like Mustard Spill and Spread, Old Steel. I like naming these LUTs something a little bit more memorable. I will never, ever be naming my LUTs. I will never be naming.
Please don't name your nuts, Phil.
Yes. I won't ever be naming my LUTs after films that I did not color grade. I feel like that's really stupid. And even the films I have color graded, like the LUTs that I made for like Riddick, Post-Apocalyptic Pancake was one of them. And there were probably 6 variants that we used on the film. Some of the ones for The Ring also had crazier names. I never named them like that. You won't see it. If Nar is here, I don't know if he is, but I won't be making an Interstellar LUT. It's
but
insult to the craft if you do that.
You should call it the black hole instead, or the singularity.
Singularity. Yeah, why not? I mean I might make a nod. Actually, since we're on that topic, I took some of my older like Marvel grades. Like this one is actually something I used with Professor X. And it's just a really nice, very cinematic style grade where you do have a little bit of color in the shadows. It's pushing things more towards it's funny because we just mentioned Interstellar, but Interstellar does have some of not Interstellar, Dunkirk more leans this way in the shadows, but yeah, you get the idea. So I got some cross-process ones that are really strong looks. And again, you can bring the curve into the equation and start having some fun with it in that direction as well. But there's a lot to go through here. I mean, some of these were developed for series. This is a whole set of show LUTs right here. Full collection of 4 different looks for different times of day, different lighting setups. I did a couple of those. Wasteland's in here. Wasteland's awesome. It's a very cool look. Early Eve, which is actually the day for night for this production. The hot day. This is more for the hot daylight stuff because it's a post-apocalypse sort of setting. Yeah, and because people wanted it, they wanted some very deliberate Kodak stuff. So here's some vision-based stuff that's pretty modern. Here's my 50D. This is the full 50D. I also made a subtractive variant. And it looks really nice. These are great shooting LUTs. I would have no problem just putting these in camera and going. The 500T, made a couple of the 500Ts because everyone likes that look. I think this is probably better to show. I mean, you can see some of the colors going in the directions you would expect. Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite test shots because it's got all those fabric swatches in there. Now it's interesting, the 52, 18, and 19 color target stuff. I did a weird analysis of that transition in color response, and this just makes up for that. Might be useful to somebody. Don't know. Included it. I thought it was a cool look. I spent a lot of time developing it. Vitamin X is a very cool stylized look. I mean, very, very awesome in my opinion. I don't know. I spent so much time making these that I think like if any of you buy FilmColor, take a moment and just go through these. Just load up a bunch of shots and just see what these are doing, how they're having an impact on your shot. And you'll find ones that just work. Like Soul is one of my favorites. In fact, you guys have seen stuff graded with this specific LUT. And it's just got this more modern characteristic because people are now taking Kodak style grades with a little bit more of a greener highlight. And it's very pleasing because you're not destroying your skin tones. It's actually a really interesting, almost color trick to the eye. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's a little bit aggressive in the color of the sky there, but look at how refined the palette is suddenly. So maybe what I would do is ahead of the curve, I'll reset this and not even use a LUT. Just bring the saturation down just a bit. Look at that. And then maybe I'll bring a curve into the equation. You see, just combining these things, very quick way of working. And I'm not telling you not to color grade. I've designed these also, let's just remove a LUT and just say, okay, what if I want to actually start integrating a tone curve in there? You can. It works just as easily. And that's the point. I wanted to provide options, provide things that get you to a very quick, strong look. That's what schema is all about. Cool. Yeah, are there questions or?
Yeah, there was a question in there about from Luca. Says if he wants to add, or if I want to key, where do I do it then? After the LUT, using your method?
It depends on what you're doing, but generally I like to key before LUTs. So let's just say I'll do a dirty key. Do we want to do a dirty key? Let's actually do a manual key. Let's do something really, really bizarre. Now, I'm going to say something really unpopular. You see what I'm doing right now. And I'm keying his skin, right?
Right.
Actually, I don't have my second monitor, so that none of that would make sense. I was like, can I do this? So I'm going to soften this up a little bit. So the interesting thing is, yes, you can key things, and yes, you can use my LUTs to just impact whatever your selection is. Like, I'll just show you that. I don't know if you should do it this way, but let me just load a polychromic. Now you're just having that slight look just applying to the skin tones. You can do that literally on the same layer even. But yeah, generally I like to key before the LUT, primarily because it's sampling the raw color data. And honestly, it's not just before the LUT, it's before you do anything. So if you were just doing this to the shot, I would still key before this type of correction, if that makes any sense. But let me make my very subtle comment about how people are qualifying. I have no problem with the amount of tools that we have at our disposal in modern times, but I see a lot of people doing things like what I just did was a very rough skin tone qualification. You can go in here and sample
Right.
and do it that way too. But you'll find that on higher end productions, that's not typically how those color grades go down. This is a very commercial mindset, and you can do some really advanced color grading, but you have to be super freaking careful when you are qualifying colors. I know a lot of emphasis isn't put on quality these days, but for productions in footage that lasts, you need to be very mindful of selection artifacts and things like that. And most of the time, I'm not keying at all. I'm doing power windows to knock down areas of where the lighting is too aggressive. Or maybe if there's a blue cast coming in on a floor, I'll do a power window or something. Because power windows are more effective than keying. Keying is certainly powerful. Like if you want to turn someone's skin green or whatever, go for it. But like all of these polychromes, these are actually using a combination of matrices. These are not doing any sort of power window selection. This is actually color being moved quite a bit, actually. And that's why it's always going to be clean. You're never going to see an artifact like that on skin, which is why I've designed them that way. I get very frustrated by this, actually. But you guys don't know, but I sometimes get hired to do like fire jobs. So a post house will contact me or most of the time, actually, a studio will contact me after a post house was delivered a project, and I will get a drive brought to me by courier, and this will be on like Thursday, and on Monday I've regraded the entire project because something has gone wrong. This doesn't happen all the time, but it inevitably happens a few times during the year. And it's because of stuff like this. Somebody went wild, and there's artifacting, and the studio doesn't know what to do because of whatever. And it's just a matter of going in and cleaning up the grades, sometimes figuring out what people did. I don't know. I don't know who's promoting bad practices or not doing quality control on your shots. Everything on every film I ever work on, I mean, we probably, I don't know how to say this, but like if this was a shot in a feature, I would have watched this probably 3,000 times by now. I mean,
Right.
just the hard truth to it. So
A comment you can address.
yeah.
Nick says, am I right in saying these are just creative LUTs? I'm assuming LUTs. No technical transform happen?
Not yet. I will show you a technical transform real quick. So right now we're on the timeline setting and not on the individual clip or grouping settings. So right now, this is ARRI footage being pumped into REDIPP2, which doesn't look awful, but it's not correct. At the very bottom of philmColorR3, you'll see these utility LUTs. Let's just slap the proper ARRI Wide Gamut log C. And what are we doing up here that's causing some sort of weirdness? Is this color managed? Did I do something weird? Let me just make sure our transforms are working. That is correct. Good. Just feels dark on my monitor, but I think that is correct.
It definitely feels dark.
Yeah, it does feel dark. Let's slap that on elsewhere. Maybe did I? Oh, I already loaded it. I'm double transforming. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this is literally what that looks like straight into Red's IPP2 color science. But now, if I just load this, there's ARRI. So this is ARRI footage. And I've made a bunch of these. I've made these for Blackmagic, Canon, Cinema Gamut, Log 2, Log 3, DJI, Fujifilm, and I'll be making more. I actually have two I've made for things that are not out yet. And then, honestly, I just need people to request them. I'll be building more of these. Like, this won't look right, but this is Sony, Panasonic, Nikon, generic Rec 709. So this is good if you have some graphics that you need to bring into Log 3G10 and REDWideGamut. But yeah, that's what's going on here. Yeah, I already grouped these with the appropriate color science. And now I'm working with ARRI footage within this workflow. Now everything looks right. And they still receive all the polychromes and the curves. Everything looks good. So yeah, that's a technical transform. Other technical transforms I've included actually are my output transforms. And you'll see I have HDR and SDR variants in 33 and 65 cubes. Right here, I'm going to call this red, mid, medium, soft. But this is what this one is. But I want to show you, these shots always just kind of work, I guess. Arc is the name of my output transforms. And the hero of that is Arc itself. So let me do something really quick. I'm going to grab the still of REDIPP2 applied, and I'm just going to put Arc out on here. I'm just going to slide across these. You see that very subtle difference?
Right.
So we have a slightly steeper shoulder, but our midtones are correct. So, and that's why all of this works, meaning my curves work with these LUTs as well underneath. So this is my color science, and my color science isn't too different from Red's. I really like what Graham Natras did with the output transforms. We had a conversation some time ago, and we were noticing a lot of people were just doing for log direct 709. They were just boosting saturation to 100%, which kind of sucks. It has nothing to do with perceptual color models or saturation or anything like that. So my specific output transforms have, I would say, almost everything that Red has, but then there's like a little dash of fill in there. And the dash of fill in there comes down to color density. And what I'll show you, here is Red's output transform. And let me just find a shot that this might actually reveal something on. Maybe on this one. So I'll grab a still of this. So this is medium soft. Now, I should take this name off. I'm just loading up Miso Cine, which sounds stupid, but MSO is my version of red medium soft. So it's actually the same curve. But do you see that very subtle density difference? Right there on the jacket.
Really subtle. Really subtle.
It is subtle. Well, I don't want to change how the color works per se, because I still want all of these, colored LUTs that lead up to them to work appropriately. But what we're doing is we're almost making a more film-like color density. And this is subtle, and it's supposed to be subtle. I don't want it to be overt. These are output transforms. These are supposed to be bulletproof. And I've made a few here. So you'll see you have arc black, which will go down to a 0 black level. Cine gives you that 2% black, I think, in IRE or something like that. I have to look at my exact data. Bow is actually closer to my film curve from the get-go. And some people have requested that because they just know they want that contrast level from the get-go. And, they can just slap a split tone or something on there. Let me reset this and grab one of the schemas in there. This works as expected. What's a good one? How about a chemical bad bath? That sounds good. Yeah, I like that look, actually. So yeah, this is Bow. That one has that sort of knee, a deeper knee in it. And I made the graphics on philmColorR3. They tell you what all of these things do. And actually, this one's actually a really fun one. Here, let me grab another still of this. This one, which is PG5, is sort of what I call is the spiritual successor to REDGaMut 4. And you can see that subtle difference there. And this is actually, I would say, more of a true Rec 709 style LUT. It's very linear from the knee up until the very peak of the shoulder. So some people like this look. I'm not going to fight you on it. But what I've done is I've designed it to maintain the 18% gray point. So your exposure and everything works okay, as well as your knee. So again, you can literally slap my curves on there and things work as expected. That's been a whole to do for me. Now, coming down here, I have my actual print film curves. These are two of them, and I've modernized them a bit and released two here. There's the 13-stop curve and the 15-stop curve, which you will see is almost no difference. But on a shot like this, watch that highlight. In fact, I'll zoom way into it. Getting that nice, like, crushed, or I guess I should say hard clipped soft highlight effect, which is very common. See that difference in highlights right there?
Yeah.
So that's what's going on. That's where the difference between 15 and 13 stops actually is. There's also a slight difference in the shadows, but it'll be clear on highlights because you can see them clear. So that's the purpose of these curves. And honestly, what's fun with these is like, okay, maybe you like this. If you really want to do that sort of traditional color grading, now you can come in here and start defining some sort of, split tone sort of grade after the fact. Now I'm doing something kind of weird here, but this is what people do.
Right.
Maybe that's the look you're after. So just, it's one of those creative things. They exist for that reason. These
quick
are the
little
red
question here. I'll answer it for you so you can take a break for your voice and maybe grab a little water if you need it.
Okay.
But it's hey, I bought R2. How do I get R3? Simple. Click on the link. When you go to the checkout, log in, and you'll see that you can just download it. It's there.
Yeah, it's even easier. If you still have the receipt from your download for philmColorR3, click on that link and it points to R3. You can just download it from that too. And if there's any issues, just shoot me an email and tell me what address you signed up with, and I'll resend your link or whatever. I've had some people who, they forgot what email. They have 15 email accounts for whatever reason, whatever.
Yeah, it was pretty easy because when I first went in, I was like, oh, it says to pay. And then everybody's like, just log in. I'm like, well, okay then.
No, it's the same way you had to upgrade from R1 to R2. It's just, it's been 4 years since I've released these. I'm sure people forgot about all this stuff.
Luca has a question. If we happen to grade with your LUTs on a MacBook Pro M1 Max with the new high output display, what best setting for each 709 DCI-P3 HDR would you suggest?
So I have been delivering content for theatrical and streaming services quite frequently. What I'm including with FilmColor is output transforms to Rec 709, BT 1886, which is pretty much the standard across all streaming platforms for SDR. And for HDR, since there is a divide there across streaming platforms, I'm giving you P3D65 in 1000 nits and Rec 2020 in 1000 nits for all of my output transforms. And these actually pretty much sync up with the most common HDR delivery standards. Now, I have projects where I'm making 4,000 nit masters. I've made a 30,000 nit master now, which is insane. I don't even know if that's ever going to be a thing. But most common 1,000 nit through 4,000 nit, I think is going to be a thing eventually for a lot of people for HDR. So yeah, generally, if you're just doing Rec 709, Rec 709 BT 1886 isn't going to steer you wrong. It's a more film-like curve from the get-go, honestly, than a traditional 709 curve. And like I said, with my arc transforms here, I'm just going to run through them very briefly. I'll just use the 33s for this. Look at the difference between this and this. That very subtle curve is a more film-like image, where this is more of a Rec 709 look. And that was the purpose. I spent a disproportionate amount of time doing characteristic curve research, and because low contrast is in right now, and where Graham kind of landed with medium soft, I think that's actually the most important setting for your IPP2 workflow. I don't necessarily recommend the highlight of very soft or the low con curves. In fact, I don't even include them. I just include medium soft because you can use my curves here to change all of that. You can load these in camera and just dial them to whatever you want. Actually, here, let me load one up. You know, if you want a lower contrast curve or a stronger contrast curve, boom, done. I just think this is probably a more useful way of working without making footage look weird, if that makes any sense. And this is what Red defaults to now, too. So, you know, I think this is a great curve. Great output transform. So, yeah, like the hard con with the hard highlight roll off. I don't think that's I don't think that's the best one in the world. I don't know where I would use that. Maybe in very low contrast scenarios, but whatever. Just to wrap up the rest of what's included with FilmColor. So for advanced users, I have these stems, and these go through P3D65, Rec 2020, and Rec 709 color spaces. And you'll see it says CST, no curve. So what we're doing is now I've just transformed to Rec 709, but now it's a flat image. That's about as useless as anything, you know, like as nothing. But now you can actually manually draw in a curve. So for people who really want to fine tune some stuff, you know, and tweak things, you can have some fun with that. In fact, I should probably bring in my edible spawns and actually finesse it a little bit. So, yeah. I want this release of FilmColor to be useful.
Congrats, Phil, you did it.
I'm all like, foot and mouth or whatever today. Yes, you know, these should be looks that are useful for filmmakers. These should be looks that are useful for colorists. You know, I'm releasing these as tools as much as I am looks. And all of my tone curves and even my output transforms are things of interest. So, and then the last category are these out resolve film looks. And you'll see I've made cine and film black versions of these in P3D65 and Rec 709, just like what ships with Resolve. And you get your Kodak and your Fujinon looks. These are literally the ones that come in Resolve, except, boom, tuned for IPP2 straight away. the REDWideGamut and Log3 G10 curve. You should not ever be feeding what Resolve ships with these anything other than proper midpoint Cineon stuff. But I've now modernized these so they're compatible with Red's IPP2 color workflow, so it's not even a problem. So maybe you want the Fuji D60. There you go, done. And one thing I should mention about my output transforms, let me just load up medium soft here. There's a sample of this particular shot on my website. This is like an extreme situation where you have to make a very tough exposure situation where obviously our taillights here are, you know, not good. So what I've included with all of my output transforms, and I spent some time tuning this, is I've made a high gamut compression, and I'll just load up the equivalent curve here on this one. So now our highlights are a little bit more pleasing. Yes, we hard clipped, but look at that. We don't get that weird magenta or whatever. And actually, if you even look at our scopes on our waveform, we're bringing things back in bounds. And this was, wow, that kind of looks like Kylo Ren's mask pattern. I just noticed that now. That's a weird, maybe that's how someone designed it. I don't know. But yeah, that weird, like super saturated yellow. Now we're just getting things. And I will tell you and show you something very interesting here. So this is with my output transform on. This shot is a very good example of why you can't just do a kind of basic gamut limit. So this fire is well exposed, and you know there's a lot of ways to limit gamut, but a lot of the ones I've seen would take this fire and go pink, and we don't want to take that fire and go pink. This is actually good. This is a nicely exposed shot. It is definitely hot, but it's not crazy like this one is. So some finessing definitely needed to be done, and I've tested this across a multitude of cameras. I mean, this has been a big to-do for me. On my list. So yeah, you get a bunch of creative looks, a bunch of output transforms, some utilities, and some grading tools like curves, and these saturation models are super cool. Really hope everyone kind of like tinkers with them because you can just really have some really fun coming up with like really cool looks. You know?
A question from Luca. For helium, do you adjust my green in the raw tab, or you made a dedicated out for it as well?
Oh yeah, let me just talk about that. I'm going to share my screen again. Sorry, I didn't mean to pop back in and not do that. So loading up this, my general color workflow is, let me blast all of this away except for that last node because I'll save that for the output transform. So let's just put reds on there, which is pretty good anyways. So we have a normal looking image. Generally, what I recommend is your first node, some people will call it BAL, exposure, expo, or CC. I've been calling it CC my whole life, like literally since I was a teenager. And it just means color correction. Now, you'll see a lot of people doing this to adjust their color temperature, right? They're just going to work it in the node. And that's cool. That's fine. It's a way to work. But I spent a lot of money on a camera that shoots a raw format proper that happens to have an SDK that has some really cool stuff happening under the hood. And I prefer to adjust all of my raw settings manually through the raw codec. Because you'll see the white balance is different. And actually it's different on a lot of different cameras versus just simply doing this. Now, I'm not saying this is wrong. If you want to start developing a look this way, you can, and using other tools as well. You know, if you find that this tint is better this way or that way, it's whatever your workflow. But typically, most of my exposure adjustments, if they're like major exposure adjustments, I'll do it through here. Or subtle exposure adjustments through here, and color temp through here. And then everything else can happen in the nodes. You know, for a proper color correction, I didn't bring any like heavy tinted material, but you know, if I have a really strange non-linear color cast, I'll deal with it through the actual grade, probably through curves most of the time. Like, I'll pick a point on here and say, okay, this is one thing. Let me get rid of my editable spines, and start, carving in a tone curve or not. Maybe we'll do blue shadows. I'm just going to make it too strong. But yeah, there's lots of different ways to work. But generally for color correction, since you have that raw data, I mean, if you're shooting red code raw, Arri raw, Canon raw, any raw, even if it's not exactly raw sometimes, I still probably would recommend doing those corrections in that, which is a little bit frustrating because this workflow is very hard to kind of like, manage across a bunch of different clips, but it's not that bad. I mean, you're going to end up working on things for a long time if it's a proper project. So, but, yeah.
The question is, what does Phil mean when he codes this stuff? Are the LUTs made programmatically instead of a program like Resolve? How are they made?
Yes and no. I do program, and I do some weird stuff. I do make LUTs through devious methods. Sometimes I'll load things up into a compositing package and start making some analytics from there. I really want to see and visualize sometimes what's going on a visual level. So I'll throw things to see how my cubes are being transformed. I will make a script that will draw out a 1D or a 3D LUT based on data, sometimes based off of user inputs. I've been thinking about a way to maybe release some of these tools. We have all these plugins now for Resolve that do a lot of really powerful things, and I think they're great. They're very useful. I mean, I own a lot of them just because they're fun to tinker with. And usually something like one feature in that program is like why I bought it, like not their color looks or anything. Like they had a really good algorithm for like halation or something. And I just wanted to see what they were doing. But the hard truth with all the open effects plugins, at least all the ones I've seen released to date, literally everything they do, you can do in Resolve natively. So the things I can't do in Resolve natively, Resolve forces you from not doing certain things poorly, which is good. For a practical workflow, but sometimes I will develop complicated looks. Like a lot of my LUTs are much larger size than I can even create in Resolve, and then I kind of decimate them down from there to see if they look good. I have to QC them for artifacts. You guys want to know why it takes you 4 years to release LUTs? You run quality control on them for 6,000 shots, shots from different cameras. So I think 3,000 of those are probably Red, maybe 3,500, and the rest are other cameras. I mean, I've had tremendous support from everybody sending me test clips outside of my own test stuff. But man, it's been a lot of quality control just to make sure everything's working okay. But yes, Beyond Nick is correct. You can code LUTs using formulas. I think a very basic one is the BT 1886 power curve, which you can generate.
And even in an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, Excel spreadsheets are a common way to generate 1D LUTs. If you want to do stuff a little bit more complicated than that, I don't know if I would focus on Excel. But yeah. Yeah.
All right, who's got questions for Phil? Throw them out there. Let's get Phil
some. Who is still awake after me talking about color that long?
they're all tuned in. They're all trying to like squeeze more resolution out of my stream.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can only do 720 through StreamYard. But at full screen, it seemed to improve quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I really like going over that overview because this is the first time we've done that, and I'll probably make some tutorial videos relatively soon. But I think the workflow is really straightforward, and the concept of even putting the LUTs in camera is really straightforward. So I'm just excited to see what people do with it. When I first started seeing my LUT show up on productions, I was like, okay, this is crazy. Normally every day prior to me releasing FilmColor has been a project that's hired me in some way, shape, or form to tackle color. But now I've released LUTs out to the world that are getting used on features and commercials and series, and I'm like, I'm not even working on these. I'm not even on set right now. Like where am I? And it's just cool. Like a production that went down in Vancouver, they very kindly sent me some dailies while they were rolling because they were so excited about how the shots looked, and I was like, that's so cool. It just, warm feelings.
I'm looking forward to going back and watching the very beginning parts, because I was operating the stream here. I was like, oh, what is he doing? How's he doing it? Just learning a little bit as we go here.
Thank you for the love too. I saw you were pumped about the release. Have you got any tips for shots from VRaptor? What you have when you have a very high dynamic range shot? I think what you're talking more is about like exposure method, maybe. Like you have a lot of dynamic range in scene. I mean, the cool thing about VRaptor is you got a really high dynamic range sensor, and you have to kind of discover how to, this is true for all digital cinema cameras, is how to rate the ISO for the given scene that you want to capture. So if you have like 9 stops above 18% gray, you're probably not shooting ISO 250. That would be a bad plan. I would recommend sticking at like 800, but maybe even 16 or 3200 sometimes. You have to kind of understand how that dynamic range displacement occurs, or that how they say, I should say, rating or whatever, calibration, whatever you want to call it, exists across the mapping across the ISO range. And I've made some graphics and stuff online about that. Those are findable, but I'm actually going to probably start gathering all of my graphics pretty soon and just putting them as a repository, because people can't search forums and Facebook and anything anymore.
You need another Phil book. Just
maybe. I really enjoyed making that book too, and so many people got use out of that. That was a really fun project, and Jared asked me if I wanted to do that, and that thing came together faster than you could possibly imagine. I've definitely published before, but that one was like making graphics, making technical text and all that stuff.
Carlos was saying, I was messing with using Canon RAW shots through Phil's color space transforms, and it makes me like the Canon RAW once again.
Well, cheers to that, Carlos. Yeah, that's the point. I mean, I got 2 Reds next to me. I'm being shot by a Sony. I got 2 Canons to my right. I mean, I'm using all of these different cameras. It's just one of those things. The practicalities of modern filmmaking is there's a very good chance at some point you're going to have more than one camera on set or on a project. I think for many, that's usually like a drone or whatever, and then you have your A cam and B cam, whatever. The cool thing about Red is all of the Red cameras play nicely within IPP2, so I don't have to do any real hardcore work there. And people get a little bit overzealous about color matching camera systems. Like, you're not even, when I do color profiling for camera systems, like the lenses are involved, it's just a whole thing. We profile lights. It's like so much more complicated, but at the same time, I think people are overthinking a lot of these concepts, because they think there's like one way to make something look like one production or one camera type, and that's usually not always the correct way to look at it, because there's other variables at play, if that makes any sense.
Right. And Carlos is saying, this is my project for the weekend, to go through and find my favorite looks so I can load them into my camera.
I know my favorites, man. And, I took a lot of feedback. There's a couple of looks that are even outside of my own personal taste, but, I ran them by the people that were really after those looks. And, some people like skin in places that I don't necessarily really see myself putting it very often. That's fine. I'm not going to fight that ocean.
I feel you, Carlos. As soon as I got it, I was flipping through it. I was adding favorites and all through Resolve, and of course, I was letting Phil know the whole way. He's probably like, "Oh God, please leave me alone."
Yeah, you were messaging me like every 3 minutes. Was like, "I really like this one," and I was like, "Okay."
Carlos doesn't think Phil sleeps. I don't think Phil sleeps either. It's kind of hilarious.
I'm going to be sleeping a lot more now that this project's done. I've been working on this thing. You have to keep in mind, I'm a full-time filmmaker. Last year, I was out of town filming for 6 months So the time in between that was when I was filming locally. So it's any spare time I was getting to work on film color, which usually are like the hours like until 3 or 4 in the morning. And it's, I mean, Andrew knows, like Andrew sometimes are on these Zoom calls occasionally that I'm on with him and other filmmakers. And you know, Scott, like we get off the call, I'm usually up for another 4 hours working.
Right. Yeah. You got to wind down from that whole thing.
My favorite was one of our friends in Texas. We got off the call and he woke up the following day and I was still working. I was like, all right, man.
That's funny. King wants to know, would you use the R5C for production work?
I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, I think it's I guess, yeah, the cat's out of the bag. I got to look at a pre-production model. I don't currently have that camera anymore because it went back to Japan. But I was really excited to take a look at it to see what Canon tackled with that particular body. And I'm an owner of the R5, so I have high curiosity about it. But yeah, it's a small, inexpensive 8K mirrorless body. Like it's in full frame. Does it have the dynamic range of V-Raptor? No. But is it
Doesn't
small?
cost what V-Raptor either.
Can it make a good image? Yeah. I mean, I hate to be these are the hard truths when it comes to production work. I came into this industry and learned a lot of things very quickly. And one of the thoughts is you only get to make the movie once. Mm-hmm. And you'll find for higher end productions that the budget for camera or lenses or anything is inconsequential, usually. I mean, you'll have a producer trying to muscle somebody down for money, but whatever. But the concept of, I'm helping on a film right now that has 20 cameras on set. Like, do you think they care about anything? Like, no, they don't. But the realities are, for a lot of filmmakers, they own one camera, maybe two, sometimes two of the same, or a camera and a cheaper one. The cameras have gotten so good that they're all capable of certain types of work. You just have to make better decisions about what cameras you bring to the party and why you would. And right now, like all of the premium digital cinema cameras are pretty phenomenal. Like there's nothing I can't shoot on Red V-Raptor. Like literally there's no type of content I cannot shoot on that camera. Now, if I start going into some lesser cameras with lesser dynamic range, would I be so confident shooting into a sunset? Maybe not. Maybe I need to make some exposure judgments and probably really observe what I'm doing to not make things clip harsh. There was a camera that came out a few years ago. I won't call out names, but it also just really did not handle highlights really well, high gamut stuff at the sensor level. It wasn't something you could deal with in any other way. It was just blasting out color. And it was a problem for a long time. And, those are things you have to be aware of. Aliasing, you have to be aware of. Like the levels of quality control. And some of this stuff doesn't matter to people, but if you are aspiring to work on higher end productions, you need to start developing an eye for quality and things that might literally cost big money to post VFX fix. Yeah.
Matt, appreciate the super chat there, buddy, and appreciate you being a long-term channel member. Always great to have people support. Nick asks, what inspires the looks you are creating?
Mostly film. To be very honest, I worked very intimately during the time that Kodak transitioned from Vision 2 to Vision 3, and I had experience on Vision 1 as well, with a little Fujifilm in there. And those were all the motion picture stocks during the 12 years I was dealing with that pretty aggressively. The last time I worked with motion picture film was 2019. And I haven't really done anything on film since, other than shooting some short ends, and I have some motion picture film as still rolls. But beyond that, I think the magic that comes with motion picture film, and I kind of like this mindset. Like you have these digital cinema cameras that have so much dynamic range in the sensitivity to capture every type of color. But the thing that's kind of magic about film stocks, especially once you get into the development processes is processes. I don't even know.
Processes?
Yeah. once you start going down those pipelines and before even color grading, you start refining the color palette just naturally, because there's things that are coming from the film stock. There's things that are probably coming from the chemicals that you're developing things in. For those who do still photography, there's literally the variation between scanning on a Frontier or a Noritsu, or even scanning it, on your Epson at home. When you start really like zigzagging down the lines and you start wrangling all these themes, you start discovering stuff. And for me, you'll see with a lot of my LUTs, they do things that are very Kodaki in nature. I aim for truer blues. Sometimes I might lean more towards a cyan or a very deep blue, but I try very hard to avoid magenta and blue, which can happen in real life. And
Right.
that's part of that refining the palette, because typically most color schemes don't vie that way, especially since you almost always have a warm skin tone. If you draw that shape, I guess I have to do this in reverse too. But yeah, that's kind of how it makes sense for me. And a similar thing is with the, colors like yellow are very interesting with Kodak stocks. Not just because of where they land on the hue, but sometimes even where their sensitivity lands. And if you think about how film works with the various layers and also the filtration layers, you start discovering why things are exposed differently. And a single CMOS sensor may not always, respond to light that way. And that's why I'm making all these things, is to provide sort of different looks at it. Yeah. So yeah, the short answer
I
is
would
no.
totally update my thumbnail to you voguing, because you were.
Yeah, that was a moment, wasn't it?
And then Carlos, on your previous comment, he's like, "I'll call it out, Blackmagic 12K," talking about the
It's a powerful camera. I mean, I would use that camera more for 4K delivery personally, but it's a good value for what you're getting. I would probably get the 6K Pro
yeah.
first, in
Yep.
my opinion. But yeah,
Joel would like to know, he has problems with show LUTs in the camera in the new IPP2 pipeline. He didn't mean timeline. I can't see my contrast curves at all, but it seems to work in the legacy pipeline.
you've answered and asked your same question in the same line. So if you're using Legacy, you're not using IPP2, so that's one thing. Are you talking about using a curve from like Red Cine, or are you talking about drawing a curve somewhere else?
I think what he's saying is in the IPP2 pipeline, he can't see a contrast curve.
But where is he
it does.
applying the contrast curve?
That's a good question, Joel. If you want to
Yeah.
refine your question.
I mean, the thing you need to understand is with IPP2, you are doing your grading before the output transform. And even the style of LUTs you can generate or whatever should exist before the output transform. And I think where that gets really hairy is a lot of people. I mean, there are literally thousands of people making LUTs now. And there's probably...
I've heard there's only one. Nope.
I don't want to set the world on fire, but there's probably 6 to 12 people making good LUTs.
Right.
And some of them work for companies. Like when Arri released the look library for the Alexa, which was kind of interesting because I was already working on FilmColor, and I was like, oh, you and I are gonna have a little, we're gonna have a little dish out. But I think Arri's mindset with the look library was kind of cool. Here's a quick commercial look. Here's a quick whatever look. That was very much sort of my initial intentions with FilmColor, but I wanted to provide a little bit more flexibility than that. That was... So Scott was on the call with me before we got live, and I put something to block the sun up.
And then now it's back.
So what you're seeing bouncing on my face right now is literally the light bouncing off of a hardwood floor beneath that shade. It's a sliver of light. Like it cuts. It's actually quite hard. It's very nice.
It's like an opal frost, maybe.
It'll change eventually.
Carlos says the Canon cameras have a problem with the blue channel, and these color transforms fix that issue. Mind blowing, really.
It's interesting, Carlos, that you say that. And you are talking to someone who has done a lot of calibration, technical LUT generation. Some of my work that you guys don't see, computer companies reach out to me and they have an entry-level laptop that barely gets to 70% of Rec 709. So I get hired to do our best guess to try to push the colors to the most pleasing way. You can calibrate the display, but like, what's vivid mode look like? So that's work I've been hired to do. And I've done this on mobile devices in the past too, especially how these sensors, these smaller sensors capture color as well. And I've learned so much, but generally looking at the broader scope of how Sony and Canon calibrate their cameras, as well as Red and Arri, you find some very interesting themes. I was doing work with Arri in the 2000s, so I was pretty privy to kind of what they were aiming at. And I'm obviously a prominent red shooter, and I know what the cameras are aiming at. And I've had some interesting conversations with Graham about what he's developed. But I think what he's done is very good. But what's interesting about Canon is their blues do lean more of a magenta often. And I think that's what Carlos is referring to. And I think in a Western culture, that is not so appealing sometimes. And I don't know if they figured that out yet. And it's the same for Sony. Sony does something that either people love or hate to skin very often. And it's a tricky subject matter on that front. But that's the whole point. Like, all of these companies are trying to get you somewhere so you can start working. If you're doing work out of camera straight away, cool. Hopefully all these cameras get you to that reasonably well. But half the reason I developed these LUTs is to do the same thing, but actually tune the color to a more pleasing spot. Either more of a cinematic color spectrum, and by cinematic I mean more film-like, really, or I should say spectrum tuning, or the curve or whatever.
King wants to know which LUT will give me the red one look out of Komodo.
It's interesting. In all the cameras I was testing recently, I still have R3Ds from Red One from a couple of films I worked on way back when. The Red One was not my first Red camera. I came in on the Scarlet and then eventually upgraded to Epic. But I used it a fair bit, and I have a bunch of footage, but I didn't put much focus on the Red One. And the original Red One sensor does have a look to it before the M. So if I can score one super cheap and I am bored out of my mind and don't mind waiting for that camera to boot up, maybe I'll do some stuff for that particular camera.
I've seen some relatively cheap, like $2,000 or less. That's
yeah. I kind of want one just to put on the mantle, kind of thing.
Right.
It's every time I upgrade a camera, Scott, it's a big deal. I'm a filmmaker and investing in this stuff, and these cameras like travel the world with me, and I have like memories. I shouldn't have memories tied to the cameras and the images.
Yeah, they're supposed to be tools, but when they're yours for so long, exactly. I feel it. I know exactly what you mean. You know
what I did on one of my Dragon cameras? I just kept the side SSD thing, and it's literally sitting on a shelf. And I just wanted to have that little memory of that first Dragon, because that first Dragon camera, man, just a lot of good imagery off of it. And that's a sensor obviously I'm very fond of.
Yeah, so. I mean, it was like pulling teeth to get that Epic Dragon out of my hands, and unfortunately I destroyed it myself, so there's that.
Oh, gosh.
Let's see here. Is there a way to use other working color spaces than Red Wide Gamut in Davinci Resolve with your LUTs?
No, I'm actually making you go into Red Wide Gamut, and the reason for that is because it's a very wide color space, and I think it's a really well designed one because it handles. Red can deal with virtual primaries. These sensors are extremely dynamic range, and we can get in some really nerdy conversations right now. But color is both technical and extremely subjective. And I looked at all the color spaces. I came very close to doing a pure ACES release for FilmColor, but it did not make sense to do it at the end of the day, mainly because of in-camera compatibility and a few other things. And I don't have anything wrong with. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Aces. If you choose the Aces workflow, cool. You can even transform from Aces into REDWideGamut and then back out. You can do all sorts of stuff. But what I need is a big box to play in. I need a big log gamma, and I need a big color space, for the lack of a better way of saying that.
Joel says the LUT is made of Cullen, just converting it for use in cameras as as 3D LUT, 33 grid, REDWideGamut, log 3 G10.
Made of Cullen. Is he referring to Cullen, the YouTuber who's been doing color tutorials?
I don't know. Joel, you want to clarify there?
What is Cullen? I'm assuming that's the guy's name, if I remember correctly. He's a pretty talented guy. I watched a couple of his tutorials. He seems to be in earnest trying to expand education. I think he just released some LUTs, if I'm not mistaken. I really like to track who's making stuff online to see who's making good stuff, because eventually you're going to bump into somebody, along the way, and you want to see if someone's talented. Oh, thanks, Joe.
Joe, yep. See, buddy. Joel says Cullen Kelly.
Yeah, Cullen Kelly. That's the guy. I don't know him. I don't know. He didn't even exist in my world until he popped up on a YouTube channel. But just converting for in-camera use as a 3D LUT. So Joel, you need to know. I don't even know what this LUT is. So I need to know what it's doing first and foremost. I'm assuming if it's from him, it's probably, does it say Rec 709 or something?
Probably. I think he's wanting to use Cullen's LUTs like yours, and I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think without knowing anything, because I know at least from a couple of workflow things, I think he's pretty fond of Aces, and I think he's pretty fond of Davinci WideGamut. Whatever he's doing, to use those in camera, you would actually disable Red's output transform entirely. Hopefully that LUT is converting properly into REDWideGamut log 3 G10, because I think it probably has a built output transform. And actually, Joel, I think the reason you're not getting any contrast out of your camera is you haven't set up the monitoring path correctly. I think that might be the case, but I could be wrong. I need to know more about what you're doing specifically.
King says, I know I could buy a Red 1, but if I could get footage like it from Komodo, I'd leave the weight training at the gym.
Well, I mean, Komodo is small and high quality, and that dynamic range is real. So I don't know. I think it's a sexy little camera. Yeah, I actually really like the top screen on it too. It's the only V-Raptor is clearly my favorite camera I'm working with right now, but like that little top screen on Komodo, I definitely was kind of like, all right, I'm into this. So
it's a nice little thing for sure. I always keep mine at the ready.
You never know when you have to beat off a wearing.
Exactly. Run, quick. I have the same relationship with my Forged Monstro. Good memory. Yeah, exactly. You
caught me at an interesting time with that one, Nick. My Forged Monstro is here, as well as my other Monstro. I am kind of waiting to see what Raptor XL does to figure out what my next moves are. I am fully planning on going to V-Raptor, but it's real early days with V-Raptor as well, and I have 2 incredibly full Monstro kits. I mean, like, you guys know I shoot aerials if you've known me. I'm in the shot over, so I have all the stuff that's needed for that. I have just a lot of ecosystem built around those cameras that I'm trying to figure out exactly what strategy to move forward is, and it's none of those answers are easy answers. So,
yeah. Carlos says, I find myself using the top screen more often than the small HD with red control. You're not wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's more snappy. It's not really about the buttons or anything. I mean, the buttons are nice, but definitely it's just more direct. It's the same difference between like the small HD monitor for V-Raptor versus the actual control. Thanks, Jared. I see that heart there.
Yeah. Did I see that the new red control just released?
Jared has been on and off receiving FilmColor updates for 4 years, and I don't even think he knew what I was doing like half the time. But now that he's seen me drop that, I hope he understands how much work it went into that. That was, I don't know if I'll have time to do something that massive. I think the next release will probably be like 60 LUTs or something. I don't know.
It's 3.1.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the Red Control beta is what they were just. That is a cool program. The beta of the new Red Control.
Yeah.
I really love the being able to just design it how I want. That's slick.
It's so nice as an app, and I think what Mikhail's done is freaking awesome. I'm actually now using that more in the helicopter. I used to be pretty adamant about it not happening, but where it is specifically on DSMC3 is in such a good spot, and I'm confident with it, both in a wireless and wired capacity. So, yeah, good job on that. I mean, it's one of the best apps out there for camera control.
I'm kind of interested in seeing if we get a new like iPad mini with an ultra bright display, because
I bought the newest mini actually exactly for it. That's literally the only reason I have the mini. It sits in my camera case because
that literally becomes a very useful monitor.
I'm actually sitting over there charging right now next to my V Raptor.
I've got the old classic mini. Let's see here. I just wish the control worked between the Movi and the Raptor. Interesting.
That is probably something that could, boom, boom.
Luca wants Jared to drop some bombs.
Oh, some teaser? Oh, wherever he is, he probably could show some toys. Thanks, Jared. Yeah, man. Thanks for the support, man. It's been when you're up late working long hours on stuff, it's a crazy thing.
Everybody's a robot these days.
Yeah.
Dog makes so much
I don't know.
noise.
I'm kind of like always moving on to new projects and things like that. So I'm a project person. That's been my thing. I end up working on a few dozen projects a year usually, and this one feels a little bit different because strangely my mother called me on the phone right after I released FilmColor, and I had this like reflection going like, what can you do in 4 years? And I was like, you can graduate high school, you can go to college, and I mean, it wasn't like I was hammering away every hour of those 4 years, but I mean, this thing's been on my mind for 4 years, and I've been working on it. So
if they made an iPad mini with a nano texture glass reduced glass, that'd be interesting.
yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
I would like to see the quality from the new MacBook Pro 16-inch screen. That quality with a nano texture glass on an iPad mini. Oh man, is that the new monitor?
Yeah, I think that'd be useful. I have the Pro. I use that as well for drawing. It's actually not even something I use for Red Control, but yeah, Apple's definitely increased their screen game. And one of the things that's really nice about their ecosystem is generally the screens all play nice with each other. You can have like 3 Apple devices sitting next to each other, and they're not too different.
Right, and with the new screen sharing, or what do they call it? It's in beta right now. It's in beta 2, and it'll be out here probably in a few weeks. Yeah. That's going to be really slick. Joel's saying it's made for Davinci Wide Gamut. I converted it for red. I tried turning off the output transforms in camera. Seems to work in Legacy. I should not take all stream for this though.
Yeah, I have a strong suspicion that your LUT is not being applied outwards. Like you have the LUT loaded in camera, and it's probably even being applied, but you gotta make sure it's enabled. I put a couple tips on FilmColor site, but maybe I need to do an expansive how to use what in camera thing nowadays. But I don't recommend actually using legacy color spaces anymore. The new demosaic is so freaking good. Like literally, I mean, for any longtime red shooters, the advancements in the color science and all the image processing over the years has been literally one of the best parts about this ecosystem. And people don't even like the word ecosystem, but I'm calling it ecosystem. It's a cinematic ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. Filmmaker ecosystem. It's a camera platform, whatever. Whatever happened, that new demosaic, literally all the cameras are brand new again. Like all of them.
Yeah, they keep doing it over and over again. It's been wild for me watching Red before I owned a Red and seeing how much they progressed. And then when I bought a Red, how much they progressed again. It's just insane.
I looked at my old MX footage with that new demosaic, and I was like, man, this is awesome. This is really sick. Some tricky dragon stuff I shot in Japan, as well as out in Utah, just transformed to like really hard stuff. So kudos to Graham and whoever else did any work on that. I don't even know.
Red has like people stashed in bunkers all over the world designing stuff.
I don't know. Graham's one of the smartest people I ever talked to, and I enjoy our conversations a lot because there's a lot of theory crafting and perspective, and I don't bug him every day of the week, but we have talks about things, and that influences my work, and maybe I influence what his work is. I have no idea, but what he's done is, I mean, he would probably be able to earn a Technical Academy Award on his own, frankly.
I really enjoy Graham, but he's one of those guys who's so full of knowledge that I just want to sit there and shut up and listen. But he wants to be human and have a conversation. I'm like, but you're superhuman. You can't.
No, I've learned a lot from him, and I don't mind talking to him about ice cream either. So.
Oh, ice cream is delicious, and yeah, those updates and his morning acting shots.
Yeah.
Nick saying, it shows how much work you put into these LUTs are stunning.
Thanks,
and
man.
For anyone, philmColor, phfx.com/tools/philmcolor. And what was it, Huckleberry? You use Huckleberry, you get $25 off?
Yeah, I'm going to run a $25 off thing for a little while. I dropped the price on the LUTs. I'm doing the coupon. This is honestly primarily due to the Komodo user group. There's so many new Komodo owners, and I can't give these away for free because this has been way too much work.
It's way too much work. But there's value in every single LUT. They're not just like filler LUTs.
They're going to last you forever. I mean,
right.
Just the concept of the curves, just those tools alone, like I think that's. I'm not saying it's worth the price of admission for the output transform and the curves, but it might be.
Nick says, I just finished grading 5-year-old helium footage, and it still feels like I shot it yesterday.
That's nice. Yeah. Well, that's also been kind of nice because Red was real early to the party for 8K. I mean, this is all happening in stages, and I've been so outspoken about film resolution, digital resolution, display technology, all of my thoughts and theories on it, and all of the people who were crying about 8K yesterday are very excited about it now, and this industry advances in staggered methods, and I'm just happy. I mean, the concept of having so much resolution that pixelization is not a thing when it comes to motion picture creation is such a sexy concept for me. And that wasn't always the pathway of digital. And the oversampling we get increases that quality. With the new mosaic and stuff, you can spit out 8K for 8K and it looks sick. And it doesn't, I don't want to get into too much weird theory, but there is a very small pixel size range that makes footage look appealing to me. I know what that range is, and there's a reason I've enjoyed the Dragon, Monstro, and Raptor sensors because it's a very sensible pixel size when it comes to how it works with lenses even. So, yeah.
And Carlos says, as much as people say resolution doesn't matter, when they see 8K footage and actual 8K resolution on a proper monitor, it's mind-blowing, and it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you over the years. I started producing 8K content proper with 8K cameras in 2016. By 2017, I had like a full-blown laboratory in my living room when it came to 8K display. And for probably 2 years, I had a lot of filmmakers visiting me to see 8K in person.
Because it was the only place you could see it.
I took pictures of people's faces with their mouth open. I'm shooting big visuals, but I also shot like some test footage out in the desert, in the mountains with some actors just to show like, I think one of the most powerful things, I shot a close-up. It was actually very along the lines of what Bob Richardson shot for Hateful Eight out in the mountains, but I had an actor turn to the camera and give a very subtle wince. And the difference of being able to read that wince with that little subtle muscle twitch and everything that you can actually see is pretty amazing. And I know people think it's all about like pores and details and stuff, but that's not how any of this has ever worked. With proper digital cinema cameras, we've already been filming in these formats. Like nothing here is actually real to the digital age. Like the digital stuff is new. We've done this all with film already. Large format films already crossed there. Now things were softer, lenses were softer and things like that. And you have that freedom of control. You use filtration, you use vintage lenses, very common stuff. I think personally, I've seen some work that's a little bit too far in that direction where it's like, is that even in focus? But whatever. I think to each their own. Make whatever you want to be.
And as the market expands, you got people that come from viewing things on television in high definition versus standard definition and don't understand how much resolution was in film. And so when they don't realize that history is there, it is hilarious to see young people today watch an actual film projection and complain about it. Well, it flickers, it looks weird. And it's like,
well, you know, the funny one for me is in December, I was at Netflix at one of their reference theaters looking at content on a pretty amazing screen. And this is all in 4K. And they're driving this through the streaming service. And I've done this with other streaming services as well. But this was just a great moment because the work I was looking at had grain. It had detail. It had subtleties of nuance of style that were applied in terms of, you know, what many people refer to as image authorship. And it's all being captured now. And if you were sitting in that theater and paid $17 for a ticket, you'd be hard pressed to know if you were actually in a theater or, you know, anywhere else. So and I think it's amazing that we can get there. Now you need to have a good internet access. You need to have a good home theater system. You know, all of those things to sell that. You know, the speaker system alone surrounding me in that theater was probably more than anybody's ever going to spend on a vehicle. So
tell me about this good internet access thing. I keep hearing about this. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's this. I know you're getting the internet by tying wires around trees up there, but
I was really sad that Elon's like 40 of the SpaceX or Starlink satellites came back to Earth.
What? Yeah, I don't even know. I saw the blip about that. I don't know why.
The way I understand it is, you know, they spring out and then they have to go out into their advanced orbit. But solar flares created so much drag on them they couldn't reach their orbit.
Are they equipped with parachutes or anything, or are they just
not parachutes? They're exploding in the atmosphere.
Oh, that'll make for a nice little telescope.
Yeah, it was like 38 of the 40, and I'm like, no, I need that for my internet.
Well, you know, write a concerned letter.
Carlos says, many people would say the Canon C200 RAW, blah, blah, blah. Is there a difference compared to RED? There is if you have the right monitors. Yeah, it's true. I mean,
the thing with all the different cameras, I'm seeing a lot of people just trying to promote the concept that there's no advantage of shooting in RAW or anything like that. And like, that's stupid. Because of the chroma subsampling. Some of these things are like so important to people that if your perspective is there, you're miles away from where the other person's even talking point is. So I kind of let filmmakers decide on their own. There's a reason like people do a lot of things, and you know, it's probably worth opening a dialogue with whatever filmmakers of why they only do this. Like I've only worked with RAW. Like this last decade, I don't think I shoot ProRes for anything. I definitely deliver ProRes or DNX HR or HD or whatever mezzanine I need to deliver in. Sometimes 16-bit TIFFs, you know, or EXRs or whatever, DPX. The thing is you need to understand what your market is, and if you are somebody who's floating in a realm where, you know, you're probably working with like AVC codecs or something similar, H.265, and you're delivering that and like the client's happy, everyone's happy, that's what you're into. That's fine. That's cool. I deal with film workflows and tend to deal with higher end imaging for exhibition and tech companies and stuff like that. So I'm like 50 miles away from the other mindset. Like we're all about trying to achieve a very high level of image quality. And that comes right down to, you know, I've seen a lot of people over sharpen lately. That's been interesting.
Guilty.
Well, I mean, everyone wants to craft a style of their look, and I'm not going to judge it, but like, and if the look works and people enjoy it and you enjoy it, like, I'm not going to question it, man. Like, I've seen some bad color lately that like people are just okay with, and I'm like, all right, I can't put a neon color that peaked on anything, but cool, more power to you.
Right. Let's see here. King says 8K for some has more resolution in real life. Can't wait for 16 and before being ready for 32K.
8K doesn't have more resolution than real life. There is a finite limit to the resolving power of the human eye, but it's beyond 8K considerably, actually. And that's if you have 20/20 vision. I mean, even 20/30 is higher than 8K, but at an optimal viewing distance and all that stuff. I think these are all talking points. I mean, I'm sure you're going to see more YouTubers come out with like, you don't need 8K, you can't see the difference between 8K, and then like someone sits in front of like probably a smaller 8K TV, like a 55 to 65, and they're like, all right. Once they see the right content on it, you're like, okay. But there's pros and cons. Like, I know a lot of people who are gamers who, the graphics cards aren't there yet and they can't run their favorite titles at 120 frames per second and stuff like that. So they don't really need all of that in some directions, but all of this is going to transform drastically. Like, literally just a few years ago, like less than 5, a good 8K TV was $100 and something $1,000. A TV that is 5 inches larger and better image quality is $2,000 on Amazon today.
Yeah.
It has moved quick, really quick.
It has. Well, and I think it's the abandonment of the old technology. They just jump onto the new and just go with it. And
it's the market adoption too. It costs a lot of money to do things first, and then they can refine the price. I mean, I think we're even getting the benefits now because our digital cinema cameras are dropping in price and becoming more capable as well.
Joel says, one thing interesting about R3D is you can dig out more details spinning the raw temperature. Doing the same in Davinci's tip slider will not reveal more clip details.
Right. So that's a trick from the color science. So there's a lot of interesting things going on because you have the raw channel data and you can actually sometimes rescue overexposed areas on faces and things like that. If you have a really tricky, like there's somebody posted an image with a light bulb and there was another image someone shot me an R3D from, and I showed them what I could recover from it. And they're like, where is that data? Where is it? And if you can monkey around with the footage for a bit and tinker on things, you can find ways to get it out. Converting it to different color spaces even can have some fun results. But, you don't want to be shooting that poorly, to be frank. I mean, you want to ideally expose well and not have your light bulb near a head 4 stops overexposed or whatever.
Carlos says, I've enjoyed Netflix has started offering higher quality content. Yeah. And they're getting more stylized too, I've noticed. Did you see Ozark season 4?
Yeah. I see where things are going. And honestly, I think to the credit to all of the streaming services like Apple TV Plus and HBO, I think HBO kind of always invested in expensive series like Rome. I remember when Rome was like greenlit, it was like $100 million, and everyone was like, what? Like, how is this even possible for a television show? But Rome was like set in Rome, and it was actually good production value and quality. And this is before the virtual screen era, so you can imagine. But everybody on the streaming level has stepped it up, and I think it's actually tied to hiring the right people behind the series as well as providing the right budgets to tell the stories. I've also seen series that have kind of fell on their head. I have a friend who worked on a series that had a $3.5 million per episode budget for a fairly simple series. And it just kind of didn't happen. They had the budget there. They even had the talent, but just, I don't know where the money was spent kind of thing. And that sometimes happens too. But when you watch some of these big series like love or hate Game of Thrones, I think you would probably still say it was money well spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big budget.
Yeah. I mean, what's Apple's new sci-fi one? I mean, there's crazy stuff going on in that show. It's like this in a series does not make sense. Like a few years ago, to even pull this off is just mind-boggling. So,
Joel says, I never overexpose, seen the light bulb in some skies, but it's amazing to know it can be done. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be able to salvage data from color channel information, and that comes from this is the benefit. A lot of people don't think of it this way because we always look at these dynamic range charts and stuff like that. But you need to think about how that dynamic range and that increases the sensitivity of the camera, as well increases the amount of color that the camera system can even capture. And I have this one shot of a hot rod. It's a candy red Chevy convertible. And it is awful to shoot something like this that has a red that jumps out at you like it's going to leap off your waveform. But I have cameras with good dynamic range, and I can expose for it and have a hot feeling red like that. That just is absurd. I know for a fact because I've seen that car for years. And this is one of the weird things about me. I will sometimes shoot the same test material over and over again. I definitely have had cameras that can't capture that whatsoever. It's gone. It turns white. It turns pink. It turns something. There's no color data.
It's kind of like the tail lights on a lot of cars, and cameras just can't do it.
Yeah.
But, okay, we've been in almost 2.5 hours. Who's got some last questions for Phil? Because the man needs to sleep at some point. Who's got last questions? Throw them in there. You got a little bit of time. We'll put 9 minutes on the clock. I don't have a clock, but just imagine one up here counting down.
Oh, okay. Well, I think if I'll say anything else about film color, it's early days. We just came out I just came out with it a couple days ago, right? So I'm very excited once people get in their hands and actually start using it more. What they are going to create with it. What I showed on your stream, little dance going on. Okay. What I showed on your stream, I hope inspires some creative grading using the LUTs, and I hope people explore that workflow. I mean, I see a lot of LUTs that just apply it and forget it, and you got that with film color. But showing you how you can get creative by adjusting the opacity via the node gain and whatnot, I think that's just such a cool way to develop looks. And if you've seen any content I've delivered anytime recently, I was probably using one or all of film color, what you guys just got. So yeah, and I'm loving the color, the deepness of the color I'm getting now. Whether it's saturated or not, it just feels, it's got some thick appeal, if that makes any sense. Thanks, Joel.
And then Luca would like to know, what monitors are you using for color grading?
All of them. No, I'm joking. So in my office right now, I have an LG 32-inch OLED. Sitting next to it is a Dell 32-inch with the built-in calibrator. I can't remember the model numbers. The LG is new enough I can remember it. Something 950. It's pretty decent. I have a micro LED screen from an unnamed brand that's larger in my office that I use as a reference display because it's very good. To my right, I have an 8K Dell. I had an Apple XDR. It's not here right now. I have a lot of screens because I do a lot of R&D and look development. I've had a Sony 310 here on and off as needed. I'm actually building a new workstation right now with the new Blackmagic 8K out card because I have a specific workflow need I'm trying to solve this year. So, and I'll QC footage on cell phones, my iPads, laptop screens, just to double check to see mostly nowadays how color is rendered and if you can see the deep shadow detail, especially if there's anything that's exposed really under key. Yeah.
Ron says, thanks for the talk. Very interesting. Helped me a lot. Hope I remember everything. This live stream will stay up, so you can come back at any time and watch this. Yep. Do you have any tips for monitor calibration, especially with Windows?
Much like exercising, do it frequently and do it often. No, I think a general good practice to get into is probably, it's kind of nice having monitors that do auto calibrate. I'm not going to lie. But I calibrate probably every 2 to 4 weeks, I want to say, when I'm doing color sensitive work. Yeah. And I don't care what calibration devices you use or something. Just do some basic calibration, if it's X-Rite or Calman, whatever. Oh, Phil from Poland. You're doing a great job. Thanks, Carol. Actually, I met a woman while I was in Iceland, and we had an interesting talk about career, and she ended up taking a production job back in her home country of Poland. And it's been interesting to see her progress there, because I don't know anything about the filmmaking world in Poland, and it's been interesting to see it.
Carlos likes his Dell 8K monitor better than his Apple XDR. Unpopular opinion.
I think they have different strengths entirely. I mean, the Dell 8K was way ahead of its time, and I have to commend them for releasing that early. And I really wouldn't mind them to make an updated one with a single HDMI or DisplayPort connection. But XDR is a very powerful screen. And it's good value for the cost. So,
Luca, like music, you got to find different references for your work. Yeah, for color grading, color monitors and.
True. Yeah.
When you're working on color, what kind of light is in your studio or editing suite? Interesting.
Not much. Actually, Carlos, since you're here, you'll get a kick out of this. When I worked at Rhythm Hughes, everyone referred to my office as the cave because I kept it so dark in there. And then eventually I navigated to an office that I made myself, which was a dark gray wall. And then Anthony Harris, who became the colorist at Rhythm and Hughes, he had a dark gray wall. So the walls were painted 18% gray, and then the lights were dim in there. So what you're having in the office is like not only something that's not inducing any color cast, but it's also just pretty dim. So you don't want to have any like warm or daylight hitting. So my actual office, I've blacked out the windows. It's an awful place to be if you're doing anything other than color work. So yeah, and it's pretty dim in there, and the walls are actually a lighter gray, but by the time you see their intensity, they're probably on the middle gray in terms of the ambient lighting conditions. But I will say I will add to that. When I QC footage, I do QC it in a variety of lighting conditions, because some people have screens in broad daylight, like very bright rooms, surprisingly so. So it's not just about what I do in my office. That's what's allowing me to focus, so I can see if like there's a little blue or something coming in on a cheek or something. I can spot those things pretty clearly. But when I do final quality control, I go nuts.
What color or colors or lack of colors do you like in your editing or color suite on the walls?
Right now I have the bulbs set to like a dim tungsten, but I will actually keep them to D65 sometimes.
Interesting.
It just depends. But they're all dim. They shouldn't really have an impact on your local white balance adjustment, if that makes any sense. You know how like if you stare at like a warm light, eventually you'll...
and then you go elsewhere and everything's blue.
Yeah, these are not even near that intensity. It's like literally ambient behind me on the ceiling. Like I'll still stub my toe. It's not that bright.
And Carlos laughing. He says, does all his color work after sunset? My wife thinks I'm nuts.
You know, my theory about why I enjoy working late is, it's the quiet hours of the day. I do a lot of my screenwriting, coding, just all sorts of stuff at the later hours of the day. And it's usually because when my brain's working, I can get those like chunks of time without being interrupted. It's a very powerful thing. I think it's I don't know if it's the same way for everybody, but it's been the same way for me for a very long time, where if I have to really chew into something, having that peaceful quiet allows me to be way more efficient than not. Yeah.
And Carlos, it's cool if your wife has a qualifier like that. My wife just flat out thinks I'm nuts. So it's cool that you're just segmented in your nuts.
Yeah.
Nick says, thanks, guys. Only caught the last part of it, but I'm definitely going to rewatch this. Yeah, definitely. It's going to be out there. I'm going to rewatch the beginning, too.
Yeah, you got to rewatch it just for my my flubs on my language. That was some tongue twisters that were leading to some.
Oh, yeah, I have them all. How do you name your nuts? And what?
Hey, man.
And your edibles.
Yeah.
This is probably already demonetized. You watch.
Too lightweight for that, but yeah, I mean, that was pretty funny.
I mean, all the times I've put my foot in my mouth for trying to get a word out, it's hilarious.
It's funny. I did a master class in Japan a few years ago, and I was doing a filming and color demo over a span of time, but I was working with a translator. And it was this really strange moment where not only do I have to move at a not usual pace for my own workflow, that I have to get like triple confirmation of what's going on. And at some point, I was able to read people's body languages well enough that I could kind of predict their questions in the audience. And it was actually really trippy because like my translator thought I was psychic at a certain point. And I was like, no, they're asking the next logical question. Like, you know, it kind of goes there. And you could see by the look on their head, like when something came up, you could see their head tilt or something like that. I don't speak the language, but you could see the curiosity. So
that's actually a really good skill, by the way. It's very handy because you can answer people's questions before they ask it based upon when they start to open their mouth, what you were saying at the time, and you can actually lead up and plot out. It's kind of fun. I do that with my wife all the time. She just thinks I'm nuts.
Okay.
Okay, so Phil, this is towards the end here. Why don't you wrap us up with a nice explain in a nutshell why people should try FilmColor R3?
I don't think anyone's ever released anything like it. Yeah, I can safely say that. And I think that on its own is something to be looked at. It's useful for all types of creators that are dealing with motion picture content. That's kind of cool. It's designed for filmmakers through colorists. That's cool. I am all of those things and have been professionally for a very long time. So I've kind of found some weird synergy and nostalgia even in designing this particular release. So that's wild for me. But yeah, I wanted this to be a very flexible kit. Holds its value, you know. Yeah, and based off the early feedback, I'm already feeling good about that because I think my intent comes through. I'm not just trying to box up something and sell it. This is stuff that's well thought out. So yeah.
And where could they find it?
FilmColor.com or phfx.com tools FilmColor, whatever. I mean, there's ways to find it. If you just go to PHFX, you can click on it too. So yeah, FilmColor.com. And I have to say thank you for having me, Scott.
It's always a pleasure having you on, dude. And
you're getting me
R3
tutorials. So
R3 has all of R2 in it as well. So, yeah. Right?
I just saw Carlos's comment there that FilmColor R3 improves the workflow, and that was looking at the sum of all the parts and looking at other colorists. When I step into other post houses and stuff and see people's workflows and my own workflows, you see that people have power grades that they save or little widgets they've made or whatever. They're what people call widgets. I'm certain other people call them other things, but we make like nodes that function as widgets basically, that you can quickly load up. And what I'm doing is providing that with a workflow that is cross software compatible as well as cross camera compatible. It's certainly designed for REDIPP2, but I think you'll find the more stuff you feed into it, it does actually work pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, there's things that I saw today that I did not click to as to how to do things, and I'm excited to go back there and play with it now.
That was my fear, Scott. That was my fear. Whenever you do something that's so out of left field, even though in my mind it's not really out of left field at all, and I think for most experienced colorists, at least based off the first email I got within 15 minutes of it being launched, it's really not an unfamiliar concept. But if you don't have the chops or experience to really dive deep into color workflow and do want to get some of that workflow there, that's definitely a mindset here. But if you like the looks and you know the simplest ways on how to tweak them, it's such a powerful release. So dig the color subtraction. Yeah, some of those. Is there a trial of film color? No. No trials, dude. No, I'm pretty, dude. I publicly post what it is. I mean, if it's not appealing for people, I don't know what to tell you. It is
It's hard to do trials of LUTs because you can't take them back.
No, and even the trials and tribulations of digital commerce are interesting with digital products, but you know, it's what it is, and I'm trying to get it out there to empower filmmakers to, you know, craft their own unique looks.
It's less than $1 for a look, and it's
that's true. You also get philmColorR3. So what is that? 178 plus 540 LUTs technically. So yeah, I mean, if I was on the corner,
it's a lot of assistance in the color space world.
It's so not about the quantity. It's about the, you know, I have different sections for reasons. So if you want to develop a black and white look, you have a full section with options there. Like that's what's fun. I didn't just come out with a black and white look pack and then come out with 5 different revisions for it. It probably would have been financially smarter to do that, just do it spaced over 5 years or whatever. But like, that's not the way I operate.
I kind of like the big gulps that you're taking. You know, you're just like, oh, I haven't done anything. Here's 500. You know.
Well, a lot of people knew I was working on it. Well,
right?
Nick, if you're telling me I should double the cost, Nick.
Yeah, Nick is like, I'd pay double. I'm like, wait, let's let these people get their LUTs first, and then
I will say this, and this is probably the stupidest thing I will say in a long time. This project isn't really about the money for me. Like, this is something I do on the side. It's made me money, and it's allowed me to continue making the LUTs, and I think that's what's empowering. But the real thing is I'm really trying to get tools out there, much like my web tools and stuff. I'm really trying to put stuff out there that's useful for filmmakers. Like, I can't tell you how many messages I get about, like, dude, I just used your format compare and it saved me hours. Like, 2 minutes on format compare saved me hours of research. And I was like, that's something that's cool. And initially, the only reason I made that tool was people were asking me those types of questions so much that it made more sense for me to sit down for a while and actually come up with something like that tool. And now it's become, I mean, I use that stuff all the time. I mean, it's just been great. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been using your tools since before I bought a Red. I was using all your format comparison and your resolutions and just doing the math, trying to figure things out, and it's been great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Carlos says this is contributing to the community in a way that no one has ever. Thank you for the generosity. Yes, Phil. If everyone could applaud at the same time, this is what it would sound like.
I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. And, you know, I appreciate the people that support the projects and, you know, even the sponsors on the tools and stuff. That the sponsors was not something I ever pursued on the tools. A company reached out and said, hey, we'd like to pay you money to put our logo there. And that was a surprising thing. And that's also been nice. It just provides you that. Honestly, that provides the cost for my servers.
Right.
Like that's all I do.
Which are not cheap. It's amazing.
No,
e-commerce is not cheap.
I upgraded to like social media class web servers last year, and that was I never thought I'd spend that type of money on that ever.
But it's amazing how much an e-commerce store costs, and you know if you're not generating revenue.
I have over a terabyte of things that people reference from even a decade ago. I've been very bad about taking old things down, like old data charts and stuff that I used to make. So I don't know. At some point, I'm probably going to have to clean that up. But like, I'm still surprised. I have some sample footage that I host on my website that I released years ago, and I don't even know how people find the link for it, but it's constantly downloaded still. And I'm like, okay, I guess I leave that up there. You know? Yeah.
It's always fun to see that. All right. Well, Phil, thank you so much.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, good to see you, and thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me close this out. You just don't go away, but everybody say goodbye to Phil. Bye, Phil. So thank you, Phil Holland, for coming out and well, not just presenting philmColorR3, but also presenting how so many of us should be doing things in Resolve for color, because it's a little eye-opening to see, well, how things should be done sometimes. And there's a million ways to skin a cat, but this is one of them. Again, go to what is it? phfx.com/tools/filmcolor. Huckleberry is $25 off, limited time. I mean, it's all the money goes back to Phil. It's all for his hard work. So remember to support and love the channel, share it, all that stuff. This live stream will be up for eternity, well, until YouTube says no. So go back and reference this. And yeah, as always, as I like to leave it, don't let your passions center around your life. Let your life center around your passions.